Thank you. Welcome everyone. It's time for the live stream again. I think we're good to go. Yeah. But yes, it is Friday. It's Saturday night. It's not Friday night. Oh boy. Yeah, I think it's time. Folks. This was a week. It was a week that started with a day of vacation, and it's still one of those weeks. So we're just gonna add a little bit of something here. And yes, I am very lucky. Hello all. That several of the folks in the chat room we have met now and again here and there. Oh yeah. At various conventions I've been to. As I mentioned, my live streams and at the panels of the live streams and such, and built up some awesome friendships out of that, which is always wonderful. Kind of what I always wanted out of the whole panel thing was to build up some relationships out of that. That's kind of how that goes, ideally, right? Is, you get to know people, which is kind of nice. It is very muggy here tonight. I will let you all know that to begin with. Not quite sure why, but it's like my AC has not been dealing with the weather, even though it was a beautiful day. But I'm feeling kind of glad we don't have smell-o-vision tonight. I'll just say that. I don't think it's bad, but so how are you all? How's your week been? This week it was Memorial Day weekend last weekend. So we got a day off on Monday, which is always welcome. Although I had a lot to do at work. So this was a kind of compressed week of getting a lot of stuff done. And I did get a lot of stuff done, but that is okay. And ditto, Becca, as I, meet folks at panels and I'm like, they're cool. Let us keep in touch. And I always like to talk to people. Yeah, I might do a little AC tune-up. One of the disadvantages of owning my own condo is I have to take care of renovations and such. Same old. Crazy flooding. I did not hear that. Hope everyone's okay there. Really good news. Got your pre-orders through the mail. That is nice. Always good with that. I actually had a story on that this week. Let's see if I can show you. So earlier this week, I got really convicted about my eating habits and trying to eat in a better way. Trying to eat more locally, more healthily. So, less pre-cooked meat, more vegetables, things like that, right? And I'm not a meat is evil person, but that idea. And so earlier in the week, I ordered this big old hunk here of Tony's Chocolonely, and sort of a Willy Wonka-esque packaging here, a whole bunch of different kinds of chocolate. And the reason I order them is because they are, and I apologize for starting off the stream this way, but they are slave-free. The chocolate industry, sadly, has a long tradition of working with suppliers who have, let's just say, very poor working conditions and some very young employees. And that was, and I read up on that a little while ago, months and months ago, and it's pretty disturbing, sadly. So there are a few chocolatiers who are committed to avoiding that across their entire thing. Unfortunately, it's none of the manufacturers that are represented in the local grocery store. So I decided to go ahead and just order a bunch, and I stumbled across these guys a while back. And so I ordered a whole bunch on Amazon, this sampler, and it got shipped, and then it was going to show up, and it's one of those things where it's chocolate, so you don't want it to be, delivered on a hot day because that chocolate will not have a good time. And I'm actually impressed. I mean, this obviously was just sitting in a USPS facility, USPS truck for half a day. It's fine. I mean, there's probably, looking at the chocolate, It has an interesting sort of pattern on it. I've been, eating that a little bit. But as you can see, I mean, it's not significantly melted. There's a little bit of oddity to some of the, it's not perfectly crisp things, but that could be any number of things. Yeah, sampler review video, not a bad idea. So they have in here, and unfortunately the wrapping does not do a great job of telling you what it is. Milk chocolate caramel sea salt. Just to give you an idea. 70% dark chocolate, 42% dark milk chocolate pretzel, 32% milk chocolate hazelnut, 32% milk chocolate, so just plain chocolate bar, and then the wrapper is 51% dark chocolate almond sea salt. Is this particular sample of things. So I'm going to try doing that. And one of my other things is I'm going to try, as I make cookies and things like that, instead of using chocolate chips or whatever, I'll just take these and chop them up, not chump them or chop them. Chop them up into pieces and use that for recipes and such. And so hopefully I'll have an ethically sourced food. And while I don't believe that we are personally responsible for every step in the food chain of everything that comes to us, there is a point at which you can't you can't control everything, and every part of the process has its downsides, right? This just really convicted me. I really wanted to do that. So, getting back to the story, I ordered these things, and got a notification they'd be arriving on Friday, and I'm working from home, so I stayed at home all day, waiting for to hear it get delivered so I could pick it up out from the outside, so it wouldn't sit outside for hours, melt. And waited, and again, it's one of those things where should arrive by 8 p.m. 8 p.m. Comes and goes, and finally I get an alert. Well, it's not arriving today. Really. So pushed back to the following day to today. But I had errands to run today, so I was like, So I went. I ended up doing a couple of errands around lunch. Hadn't been delivered yet. Came home, still hadn't been delivered, and then was actually working in the kitchen when I heard someone coming down coming outside, hitting the doorbell, and was able to go out and get it immediately. So that was a relief that it was there. I was able to keep it from getting, and it was a nice day, so it wasn't gonna melt in even if it was sitting out there for a while, but still. So definitely one of those things where you're like, when is it gonna show up? When is it gonna show up? When is it gonna show up? Right? They have mask requirements around my area shop. Yes. So the current recommendation in my area is masks in shops, basically. So if you're in a public place inside a relatively confined area, right? If you're just walking along the sidewalk, it's not as big of a deal. But inside that's a big deal. World building this month. That is awesome. Good idea. My hobby hopper for this coming up month might be knot tying, I think I mentioned before. Would not mind that. Would not mind that. Ooh, that's good. Oh, that is the correct combination of things. Hey, Spin. I thought you said Hobby Lobby for a second. I was like, I thought Hobby Lobby was still closed. Well, it might be open now. Yeah, and the nice thing, though, is this weekend things have opened up in my area somewhat. So restaurants can do outdoor seating and stuff like that, as long as folks stay around or stay spaced from each other. Then that is more acceptable than it used to be in the past. That's good. Oh, nice, Becca. Yeah, knot tying is one of those things that I think is just a useful skill to know. All I know is just the simple, you do it like this. You do that, and then you tie it over that again. I know that, and then I know the classic bow knot for tennis shoes. That's all I know. So I think a few other knots will be helpful, especially as I get into some of these other other hobbies. Gundam like sci-fi with a magic like world. Oh, cool. So kind of like a Dunbean, or Battler Dunbean in the world of Bison Well, which is, I mean, biological mecha, but it's still sort of fantasy mecha, which is cool. Cuffs are so much more user friendly. See, I don't go in. That's now we're getting personal. Welcome, Solari. Any new anime this week from you all? Any stuff you've been watching? I'm trying to think. Last weekend, what did I watch? There was something that I watched since seeing all of you. The first few episodes of something or other, besides the Friday night thing, which was fun. Where we watched the Gegege no Kitaro movie from 1968, which was just 2 episodes of the TV series, basically. But that was fun. Went back to watch Burst Angel. From what I've seen of the trailers of that, yes, Burst Angel is definitely something. Keeping up with Glepnir. Cool. How's Glepnir now that it's kind of gotten deep into the story? Paradise Kiss. Boy, there's an older one. Cool. Demon Slayer. Yeah, I want to get back into Demon Slayer. That's very much high on my list, just for the animation alone. Finished Combustible Campus Guardress. What did you think, JJ? That's cool. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed Guardress, as I said in my review, but that's just because it was, pushing all my buttons. Konosuba, Rising of Shield Hero. Nice. So frustrating when you watch something and you're like, wait a minute. I have a list of this. I should probably consult my own list. Does that show up here? No, it doesn't. If I go to my profile, I'm using analyst.co recently. Oh yeah, so Devil Hunter Yoko, first 2 episodes of that. OVA from the early 80s, mid 80s, I think. Very influential on Sailor Moon, as it turns out. The first episode is very much aimed at an older audience, not in terms of like blood and guts, but in terms of like the main character must remain untouched by a man for her to get her powers, and that is a very major plot point in that episode. So it was interesting. It was fun, sort of supernatural adventure kind of a thing. And I can definitely see the Sailor Moon sort of influence, or the influence it would have over Sailor Moon and such. 0083, yeah, see, I would agree with you, man. For me, that is the weakest of the offshoot UC Gundam series. A bit of Sailor Stars, nice. So there was that. What else? I also tried watching some of the Fate franchise and made a fatal mistake. Ha ha ha. That was a joke. Everyone had recommended Fate Zero as being kind of the one everyone should watch. And I didn't dig into it enough to realize that Fate Zero is sort of a prequel to the main storyline, like the visual novel storyline, the core storyline of those characters. So I started watching Fate Zero and was like, this is interesting, but this does not look like any of the characters I'm familiar with. Then I went back and I was like, oh, okay, Fate Stay Night. That's what I should be watching. So again, nothing. Yeah. Nothing against Fate Zero. It's just like this was not the right starting point for me for the franchise. And so went back into to watch Unlimited Blade Works, which I'd heard that so correct me if I'm wrong. Apparently, the original Fate Stay Night anime is an acceptable but somewhat rough animation-wise sort of adaptation of the original visual novel. And then Unlimited Blade Works is kind of the, okay, now we have a budget version. At least that's what I've heard. So I went back to UBW, watched the first episode of that, and was like, okay, I get it. Yep, this is intriguing. The characters are are kind of nicely introduced in a way that makes me interested in them, gives me an idea of things. So that was cool. Um, so watched that. Oh, the original went off the story, the original plot, and so is UBW more close to the original plot then? Different studio, better tag for UBW. Okay. The second UBW is definitely pretty more polished. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So I may go back. I'll probably go back and watch the first episode of like the original just to get a feel for that. And then I might watch more UBW just to dig into that. I really enjoy UBW. And it would be nice to kind of get a sense of that franchise, kind of dig into that franchise a bit more. So got that context. And then anything else, a bit more of My Life is a Villainous, which is just cute, fluffy, my mind is mush and I need something to entertain me kind of anime, which I like now and again. And indeed, I will be talking about one of those during my recommendation corner tonight. And so that was fun. Oh, wow. A lot of references and listeners then. Cool. So yeah, listeners, I'm sorry, Villainous, I'm only 2 episodes in, but it's definitely been just, okay, yeah, this is a fun thing, and what I like about it is it's very cute. It's all the characters are kids at this point, but it's like cleverly cute in that. So I get frustrated when comedies are, here are cute characters and we're just gonna watch them sort of say bland things to each other, and because they're cute, that's gonna carry the show. So I don't need it to be incredibly complicated or incredibly innovative, but Villainous has just enough things plotted in there where I'm like, characters are interacting in a way that builds drama naturally, and then you'll throw in a plot twist where I'm like, oh, that is a reasonable reaction from that character. I did not see that particular plot twist coming, so I'm glad to see that. Those of Inuyasha Viz Big manga, cool. The print model of manga is an interesting beast. Speaking of which, I want to. Beastars is very much on my short list. Been bouncing around on Netflix a little bit and seeing that pop up, and I'm like, But yeah, I'll be very curious to see in 5 to 10 years what the manga model is in America. Just because it's so hard to maintain, manga as a thing because of print runs, in terms of physical releases. And so I wonder how much digital is going to impact that, and whether we'll just see a significant shift towards digital. I know a lot of folks, and here's the other problem, is that a lot of manga readers just refuse digital. So I'm just curious to see how that's going to affect things. It's not really a problem we had on the anime side, because folks were definitely, had no real problem shifting to digital in terms of anime distribution. But I wonder if manga is just going to have a harder time with that. I don't know. But as I mentioned last week, digital was the only way I could read some things, because there was a release, and then it was gone. Right. MAPPA has a lot on its plate. It is one of the busier anime studios out there. Which, thumbs up. Speaking of, there was a light novel that popped up on the Discord, which I dug into a little bit because I was like, what on earth is that? It actually had a really interesting premise. Speaking of that idea of the doing something interesting with the typical isekai premise. So the title of it is Buck Naked in Another World. Sort of average, and premise is average middle-aged man wakes up in a fantasy world, buck naked. And the idea of the premise actually is that, like, literally he is showing up in this world and he has no special powers, he has no magic, he hasn't, figured out how to accidentally, trick a dragon into inhabiting his body or anything. He's just a guy. He's a little more physically strong than like the average person, but well within human norms. And so he's just a guy now in this fantasy world, and that intrigued me. Is this idea that it's buck naked, not in the sense of constant nudity, but in the sense of I now have to figure out how to fit in a completely different culture, and how to sort of take advantage of what I know from my previous life. So that I like. Yeah, Buck Naked in Another World is the title of the light novel. I don't think there's been any adaptation announcement or anything, but that was just kind of an interesting idea. But yeah. There we go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of see what you're both saying, Jay and Spin. There are certainly dark isekai, but I do think that the most popular isekai do tend to have dark elements to them. But I do think the average isekai, especially like the average isekai light novel, is usually pretty light in tone, usually pretty consequence free. In at least in tone. Obviously, bad things can happen, but there is this interesting sort of assumption in a lot of isekai stories that it's going to be, about a young man reincarnated into a world and then figuring out and being able to have kind of their ideal life in that world. One moment. We're live. Exactly, Solari. It's going to be really interesting if done well. It's just, it's Sturgeon's law, right? Um, Thank you. That was definitely a sneeze. You know what I'm going to do right now? Well, absolutely, Jaden. It is not crippled. It's evolving. It's doing very well. In fact, I can show you that. Do I still have? I don't think I do. I recently re-downloaded. It's probably I wonder if it's still in my trash. I will pull that out. A lot of open things. 1 second. There it is. So there's an anime industry report put out regularly by a third party, and I can show you all. If the screen share will cooperate, let's see what I can do here. I want to do local desktop. Has to be over here. Okay. So I'll move that over here. I will try to zoom in. And can I hide that? Hide. Yeah. Okay. So this is a view of the Japanese animation market trends in terms of basically, amount of money coming in to the anime industry. 2002 is on the far left, and 2018 is on the far right. That's the last year for which we have data. And as you can see, that's that trend is definitely upwards. And it's definitely improved. 2018 was about the same as 2017, because just that happens sometimes. As you can see, we frequently have years where it kind of levels off for a little while. This is broad sense, so this is basically animation and animation-related markets. So this is soundtracks, this is toys, this is everything else, is at the top here. And then the limited sense down here is basically how much money animation studios are making. Right, how much money is coming into animation studios, which gives you a more limited, a very specific view, but a view that's helpful because it tells you specifically about the production of animation, how much money is being put into actually producing drawn works of animation. And as you can see, there was a spike in 2004, 2005, 2006, and then went down. It's been going up since. So more money flowing into the market. So you know, anime's doing fine, all things considered. So I thought that might be helpful and useful to folks. Oh yeah, anime is definitely mainstream in any reasonable sense of the term. In the sense of average people knowing what anime is, it's definitely mainstream. It's not mainstream in the sense that everybody watches it. It's not mainstream in the sense that like NCIS, right? But very few ththings are. That's an extremely high bar for anything. I doubt anime will ever get to that point. And you can look at that at any genre or medium rarely gets to that ubiquity that people expect. And I don't think most folks are looking for that. Exactly, but the same is better than less, and that's also no industry can grow every year forever. There are going to be times when things settle for a little while. Either going to be times when you contract somewhat. That's natural too. Yeah, exactly. Anime will made it in the U.S. when we get those fantastic sort of Ghibli-esque McDonald's commercials. I think we're kind of getting there. Yes, and man, isekai is a term kind of like moe. It is a term that has evolved recently to explain a modern boom in something that has been around technically for a while, just was not nearly as big. So, as you mentioned before, Our Battle of Dunbean in the 80s, Escaflowne in the 90s, those were all, El Hazard, those are all series where characters from, Japan, basically, are transported to fantasy worlds. But it boomed massively in the last few years, and just lots and lots of these isekai series. And so isekai just means, other world, or world, technically. And that has become kind of the term. So and we are not already seeing signs that it's starting to pull back a little bit. We're not seeing as many isekai series right now. Exactly, JJ. Yeah, everyone in Japan just watches anime all the time, right? Like it's on a constant loop. No, not so much. So yeah. It's like so many things. Like we mentioned, moe. That was its own trend. Although moe is interesting because moe did kind of infiltrate the industry and become kind of an art style or kind of an approach to character that has stuck around. I think there are a lot of moe characters still in anime series where the series itself isn't moe. But yeah. My favorite isekai series. Good question. Good question for the group. If other folks want to answer that. So as usual, I'm going to answer that in a couple different ways. I think the most the most impressive isekai series for me is Escaflowne, because it does so many things. And not just that it does so many things right. That's a very personal thing. Escaflowne is executing on many different fronts. It is very different from a lot of typical anime series. It's combining different genres. And so I think it's just really impressive in terms of its scope and its ambition. So I loved Escaflowne going through it. But those last 3 minutes of the original El Hazard OVA bring a tear to my eye every time I see it. And I actually rewatched it recently. And man, El Hazard just hit me like a ton of bricks. That really comes together in the last. And it meanders a bit in the middle. It meanders quite a bit in the middle. But it just comes together in that ending in a way that just was really strong for me. Dot Hack Sign, I mean, technically not isekai, it's a video game, right? Trapped in a video game. But if that counts, Dot Hack Sign was, I'm pretty sure, the first isekai series I saw. And it has its issues. Oh boy, does that show have its issues. But it is really, really I came to really care for those characters and for the situation and so forth. So Dot Hack Sign is definitely up there. There's probably another one that I'll remember that I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. That I'll say, oh, that was, that was one I really loved. But those are the ones that jump to mind for me. Yeah, that's fun. You wouldn't be able to rewatch Dot Hack. That's interesting. I wonder why. Yeah, I'd happily rewatch Dot Hack Sign. And so, FYI, the issue for me with Dot Hack Sign is that it's basically a character study. It is a very, very long prologue for the plot of the video games. Very little gets resolved plot-wise in Dot Hack Sign, despite it being a 26-episode anime series. So if you realize that and go in and realize this is basically all set up, then I think you'll have a really good time with it. But by the time I got to the end, I was like, wait, aren't they going to deal with any of this stuff? No. Okay, fair enough. Can you taste? Yeah, it is very slow. It is very much about, okay, there's this thing. What are we going to do about the thing? And it's one of the things I like about Dot Hack Sign. It is also arguably a weakness. But there is a very realistic pacing to Dot Hack Sign. When real people discover there's a mystery, they don't solve it in a day. They piece together clues. They learn things. They dig into stuff. It takes a while for that to happen. They think for a while and talk about it with people. So the pacing felt very refreshingly realistic to me. Again, that doesn't make it palatable for everyone. But that was something that I kind of enjoyed about that. Cannot rewatch Clannad. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, there are different things. I'm going to do a giveaway since we're all here. This is not an isekai series. It is a mecha series, but it's an unusual mecha series. I'm going to give away a somewhat battered copy of the first volume of Martian Successor Nadesco. So this is a mecha series which, according to legend, they were producing, and it was hitting so many mecha tropes in the mid to late 90s. It was just so tropey that apparently at some point during one of the production meetings, pre-production meetings, the director sat back and said, what if we just made it all a parody? So Nadesco is a parody of mecha series while also being a mecha series. It is also kind of a parody of the Evangelion trend in anime. So this is kind of a joke. This image, actually, because this character, who is Shinji, it just is Shinji, that is very much his intent, is constantly trying to run away throughout the entire thing. He just wants to be a cook. And so he's constantly literally running to the kitchen, trying to cook instead of piloting the giant robot. But it is also a mecha series. It's not a pile of jokes with a thin veneer of mecha over it. It is a full long mecha plot all the way through the series. It's really interesting. And there are some dark moments in Nadesco. It goes there with its series. Some of which are very much sort of Gundam-esque. We got to have some of those moments. But others where I'm like, wow, the plot introduced and built up to this thing. And yeah, that is a thing. So yeah, Martian Successor Nadesco, I'm going to auction off the first volume of that, and we're going to do that in a typical way. So I'm going to roll the die of anime genres. And we have hit on a genre. So I'm going to throw this up here. Go ahead and throw in the chat what genre you think I rolled on there. And whoever guesses right will win. I will ship this copy of Nadesco anywhere in the world. So go ahead and throw that in there into the chat. Oops, sorry. It's in the wrong place. There it is. There's the list of genres. That's a lot more helpful. It's a lot easier for you to guess when you know what the genres are. So one of those genres is on the die. What do you think it is? Anywhere in the world. Yeah, I watched Let's Go all the way through. Really, really enjoyed it. Ginger, I'm impressed. I'm amazed. First try, first attempt, and you can't see that at all. There we go. Idol was it. Dang, Ginger Gaiden. Well done. Please PM me with your information. Do I have... Nope. Oops. Hold on. I used to have my email address on here somewhere. Nope, I don't. Okay. Twitter works great. Garchaeology. I also technically have a Brent Newhall as a Twitter account, although I never use it anymore. But yes, however you want to send that to me, please do, and I will ship this off pretty soon. May take a couple of days for me to drop it in the mail, just because mail service right now is a little weird and getting out and all that kind of good stuff. But yes, yeah, there we go. Just listening to Ginger. So yeah, that works. Congratulations. I will send that off, and I'm going to put this over here so that it does not wander away. And I'm like, oh, why did I put that over there? Okay, cool. Thank you, Ginger. I will keep that in mind. And in the meantime, do y'all hear that? Thank you, Becca. Thank you, JJ. So I was saying, JJ, if you ever watch Key the Metal Idol, let me know, because I have a lot of things to say about Key the Metal Idol. Many of them good. So yeah, Key the Metal Idol. Oh, that is a thing I watched. Okay, that's there. That's good. I think we're ready to go. Hello and welcome to the latest anime news for the week ending May 30th, 2020. This week's news is back to the more usual content, which means starting with our new anime announcements, and starting that with another isekai light novel and adaptation. Yes, that's right. Big shock there. Micro Magazine announced this week that Hirotsugu Ryosen's She Professed Herself Pupil of the Wise Man novel series is inspiring a television anime. Here comes the story synopsis, so get out your isekai bingo cards now. The novel centers on Kagami Sakimori, a veteran player of a virtual reality MMO video game. His character is one of the game world's 9 great sages and appears as an elderly wizard. When he gets an appearance-changing item, though, he begins to wonder what his character would look like as a cute girl instead. After falling asleep with the game suspended, he wakes up, of course, in the game world as his character, but his character is now in cute girl form. The novel began serializing on the Let's Become Novelists user-supported website back in 2012 and began its print publication in Micro Magazine in 2014. The series has more than 1 million copies, 1 million copies in circulation, with its 13th novel volume published just yesterday. The novel has also inspired a manga adaptation which began in 2016. So, yep, sounds like it's right down the isekai alleyway, or isekai world valley, whatever. So we've had our fantasy isekai announcement for the week. Now onto the questionably more adult edition. The fifth compiled volume of Ikumi Hino's manga Megami Ryo no Ryobokun, or Dorm Mother of the Goddess's Dorm, officially confirmed this week that an anime project is in the works. The series was teased back in April when the first pictures of the volume were revealed and the cover hinted at the new project. The manga's story centers on 12-year-old boy Koshi Nagumo. Koshi finds himself homeless and penniless, like it seems so many Japanese 12-year-old boys in anime, and is picked up from the streets to become the dorm mother at a dormitory full of troubled women's university students. That's not creepy at all. Surrounded by idiosyncratic and difficult older women, Koshi begins a slightly ecchi new life, is how they describe it. Imagine that gender swapped. Actually, don't. The manga launched in Kadokawa's Shonen Ace magazine in December of 2017 and had its fourth compiled book published back in October. Our next announcement continues along classic anime tropes, this time that every organization has to have a cute mascot. A television anime series has been revealed for the MIFA organization's panda mascot character, Mifanda. Wonder where they came up with that name. That's a stretch. MIFA, which stands for Music Interact Football for All, aims to bring together soccer and music to promote communication. Sure. The new TV anime titled Mifanda the Singing Soccer Panda, I'm not making that up, will premiere in July and will feature Mifanda and two of his apparently many teammates. Next up, it was also announced this week that Soro Tanagawa's manga Taeko's Everyday Life is inspiring a new TV anime series. The series will premiere on Tokyo MX on July 1st, with new 1-minute episodes airing each day, Monday through Friday at 5:59 p.m. So this is going to be a really short one. The story centers on office worker Taeko Shinbo, who is always patient and greets anything that comes her way cheerfully. Aww. The manga previously inspired a 26-episode TV anime, which aired in October of last year, in case you were wondering, doesn't that sound familiar? The cast from the first anime will be reprising their roles, including Taeko, who is played by an actual company employee from the outskirts of Tokyo named Tanaka. That's pretty cool. The manga debuted on Twitter in 2015 and began official publication in City Living magazine in 2016, with its third compiled book volume released in March of this year. So, relatively recent work, and coming again to anime in very short snippets. Last up for this week's new anime, an anime adapted from a game adapted from an anime, because why not? The Yuki Yuna is a Hero, a Sparkling Bouquet smartphone game celebrated its third anniversary this week with a live stream where it announced that the game is inspiring its own short anime featuring an original story. The story also features the transforming girls of Sanshu Junior High's Hero Club, where the club president announces the development of the long-awaited Hero Club Udon. It sounds like it might be a little less serious than the original anime, just guessing. The new anime is also the fifth part of the celebration of the original anime's 5th anniversary. The original Yuki Yuna is a Hero TV anime aired in October of 2014. The smartphone game launched in June of 2017 and launched on PC in October of 2017, which is also when the anime's second season premiered. The anime also inspired a manga adaptation, as all decent anime do, which ran from 2014 to 2018. Man, things move that quickly. You got to do things 5th anniversary releases. Fittingly, the week that brings that announcement of an anime adapted from a game also brings several announcements of new games based on anime. Several anime properties announced this week that they have video game adaptations in the works, and you see some of them here. First up, a little series you might have heard of called ReZero. Spike Chunsoft announced yesterday. Is that just me? Is that a weird name? Spike Chunsoft. They announced yesterday it's developing a new game based on the ReZero Starting Life in Another World franchise, which is set to debut on PlayStation 4, PC, and Nintendo Switch sometime this winter. The game, subtitled The False Royal Election Candidate, is based on the royal selection storyline from the anime's first season, but will tell an entirely new what-if series of events with plot supervision by the series' original author, Kape Nagatsuki. There we go. Next up, a whole set of video games based on an anime based on video games. Everyone's still keeping up with all this. A live stream special celebrating Dragon Quest Day has announced not one, but 3 upcoming video games from the Dragon Quest The Adventure of Dai franchise. That's D-A-I, not D-I-E. DNA, that's D-E-N-A, is developing a smartphone role-playing game where up to 3 people can participate cooperatively. The developers plan to release further information in the fall, with a game to launch for iOS and Android sometime in 2021. And that's a pretty vague date, but hey, video game developer. An arcade game is also in development, which is pretty cool. How often do we get to hear about brand new arcade games being developed? That game is coming soon, slated to debut sometime in or after this fall. So basically, in a while. Thirdly, Square Enix itself is developing the new Infinity Strash Dragon Quest The Adventure of Dai game for game consoles, which will also release sometime in 2021. So, Dragon Quest fans rejoice. 2 more anime-based mobile games were also announced this week. The Saga of Tanya the Evil is inspiring a smartphone game titled Saga of Tanya the Evil, Thus the Mages Did Clash, which sounds like a really weird Christmas song. The game will be based on the anime story, but will also feature new events from the perspective of different characters. So that's something to look forward to for those fans. Last up, the quintessential Quintuplets is also getting its first smartphone game, set to be released sometime this year. The 500% cuteness quintuplet love comedy puzzle game, that's what they're calling it, is being developed by Enish and will feature an original story with the anime's 5 main voice actors reprising their roles. I gotta admit, I guess it's the only way to do that. Now, those of you who've been saying we should have copyrighted the online con idea when we had the chance might just have been onto something. This week, both Aniplex and Anime Expo announced that they will be hosting online events across the 4th of July weekend. Funimation is also holding its virtual Funimation Con 2020 that weekend, so anime fans will certainly not lack things to watch as if they didn't already. Aren't we all already catching up on all of our anime now? The Aniplex Online Fest will be held on July 4th and 5th, and why can't they just call it festival? And will be free to attend on YouTube. The event's official website describes it as follows, and I quote, "The festival will feature a diverse array of online content, including talk shows with the staff and cast from popular anime, special appearances, and past live shows from music artists, and behind-the-scenes stories from the anime industry," end quote. The event will be hosted by bilingual idol Sally Amaki, a member of the Japanese idol group 227. Musical acts who have been confirmed so far include 227, Lisa, Mashiro Ayano, and several other groups, so there is sure to be something for any anime music fan. Anime Expo also announced its online event this week, with Anime Expo Lite to be live streamed on July 3rd and 4th. The event will feature artist and character designer Yoshitaka Amano of Vampire Hunter D and the Final Fantasy game franchise, as well as other guests, industry panels, exclusive content from Japan, and giveaways. Pretty much all the things you would expect. The event will also feature content from companies such as Bushiroad, Crunchyroll, Pony Canyon, and Viz Media. So they got some fairly heavy hitters on the docket there. Now, Anime Expo is originally going to host the world premiere of Amano's Gibi8 anime series and include a panel about the anime as well as a mini concert of the music. Who knows the exact details of that, however. With many of the summer's new anime series being canceled, what better time than the present to start catching up on the classics? Digital Media Rights has partnered with Tezuka Productions to release nine anime titles on its Retro Crush service starting on June 5th, so just in a few days. These titles include the 1980 remake of Astro Boy, as well as the series, films, and OVAs from the 90s and 2000s. The first 2 titles, Blackjack and A Time Slip of 10,000 Years, Prime Rose, will release on June 5th, with the rest premiering afterwards from June through August. Astro Boy is definitely a classic, so that would be probably worth checking out. Last up this week, much of our business and personal lives have been moving over to Zoom, so why not our favorite anime and manga stories as well? Seimaru Amagi, co-creator of Kindaichi Case Files, and the stars of the anime adaptation have taken it upon themselves to provide some new content amongst all the reruns and rewatches. Amagi has created the Kindaichi Case Files, the Stay Home Murder Mystery, as a two-part Zoom drama featuring the series actors and voice actors telling an all-new two-part story. Stars Hajime Kindaichi and friend Miyuki will be pictured during the presentation with limited animation manga art, while the other guest characters will appear in person on screen. Detective Kindaichi will be working from a distance to solve the murder of an old woman. Each suspect will appear in the call during the first broadcast to try to defend themselves, and Kindaichi will use his deductive skills to determine the murderer in the second. Clever fans might even have the chance to join a Zoom call with the stars during the broadcast second half. A quiz will allow viewers to choose who they think the culprit really is. 10 lucky viewers will be chosen from the pool of correct answers and will get to participate in a call with the actors after the special has aired. The first half of the Stay Home Mystery will air for free on YouTube on May 31st, which is later on today in Japan as I'm recording this. The second half will stream on the Twit Casting website on June 6th and will cost 500 yen to view. Aha. Still, clever idea, cool idea. Be interesting to see how that goes. That's the news for this week. Thanks for watching. So, yes, it's a good question, JJ. I think the thing about Zoom is it's just, and there it is. It's a meme. I think Zoom just became the thing everyone used. And because Zoom had more business penetration, everyone was using that from business. And so they just started using it in their personal lives as well. It was just an easy jump over. Skype has had some security issues. Not that Zoom hasn't. But also being owned by Microsoft, that just has kind of leaves a bad taste in a lot of folks' mouth. Not that Microsoft does everything evil, but that I think the fact they took over Skype and then changed a lot of its features around got a lot of folks annoyed with Skype. And Zoom is just a little easier to get. I think Zoom just was built more recently. It simplifies a lot of things, and they have moved pretty quickly on feature sets. So they have really upgraded the functionality of Zoom dramatically over the past few months, which is good on them. And added more security, which is pretty important. Scrolling up to see any other notes. And it looks like, and JJ, it looks like the manga was originally released on Twitter. That is a big thing now, just Twitter manga, especially for 4-Koma. Tanya FPS, maybe, yeah. But yeah. Well, they're not, obviously, they're images, not text, JJ, and it's 280 characters now, too. But yeah, that's the thing, is that I think, it makes a lot of sense to just post your manga on Twitter and get your following that way, get your audience that way. Maybe it might be a fun thing to try. At some point. Thanks, Becca. Thanks for stopping by. Great job on the news. Many folks reviewing the Pluto manga, not the manga it was based from. Currently reading the Astro Boy story, Greatest Robot on Earth. I think Pluto is based on. Yes, correct. So, correct, N-Man. The Greatest Robot on Earth plotline in the original Astro Boy is the, I think, basis. is a good word for the Pluto story. I mean, Pluto goes off in very much its own directions. It is a wild adaptation of The Greatest Robot on Earth, but that was its sort of original. And the thing is, Astro Boy is a little weird because Astro Boy is just from another time. So folks will go back into Astro Boy and they have to get themselves into the mind of the way manga was written for children in the 1950s, early 60s when that storyline came out. I think that storyline was from the 50s, and it was a different time. Pacing was very different, so it's a lot harder, I think, to review the original Astro Boy story than Pluto, which is much more recent, like you say, and much more and obviously is designed to be this sort of 8-volume self-contained story. Urasawa obviously had a lot more time ahead of time to kind of think that out than Tezuka, who was probably writing it as he was drawing it. So yeah, it is tough. Watching the omnibus, nice. I have yep, there you go. So it's kind of hiding behind the Turn A Gundam, but there's all my Astro Boy right up there. Volumes 1 through 18, I think, of the first release on cheap paper. Let me show you this. I'm kind of annoyed. I mean, I understand, but this is what my copy of Astro Boy looks like now. And don't look at the lines. Look at the paper. Like, that is some serious yellowing. Like, that is almost browned at this point. And it's worse in some spots. Yeah, it's actually... So yeah, I mean that's getting pretty significantly yellowed. That's just frustrating to me. And I mean you can see just the you can see. I mean that is pretty thin paper there. So I mean I understand Tezuka stuff does not sell well in America. There's a very minimal audience there, but yes, JJ, you got that right. I have not been able to find a good spot for Yakul. Sorry, but Yakul there. Unfortunately, is one of those plushies where if I put them far away, you can't tell what it is. It's just that it's so small, so I got to figure that out at some point. That is one of the few things I stumbled across. I think at a con somewhere where I was like, "Yep, buying that." 63 for the Pluto story. So wow, while he was doing the Astro Boy anime, he was also drawing one of the most iconic Astro Boy stories of all time. Crazy. But yeah, Astro Boy. The thing about Astro Boy to remember is that it was written, as this continuously ongoing shonen series for years and years and years. So it is very episodic. Some of the storylines are longer than others, but it's action adventure, just constantly churning through. And it doesn't really try to make a lot of the same kind of rigorous sense that modern manga and anime stories do. Like the consistency isn't really there. Tezuka was not writing for an audience that was nitpicking all the details of those things. So he could be a lot more free flowing with his ideas and just kind of throw things at the wall and see what stuck. It's again different time. Folks can't get away with that anymore, which kind of saddens me at times. There's I think creators can be very scared of their audience now, understandably so. And I do fear that might be limiting creativity in some of the stories that we consume. But who knows? Um, Nice, yeah. And one of the problems with Astro Boy, by the way, is that, and I just find this interesting, is that there is no canonical version of Astro Boy because Tezuka redrew it over time. When he would re-release Astro Boy, he would redraw panels and sometimes redo whole pages, add new pages into the middle of a story because he wasn't unsatisfied with it, and then would go back and like revert those changes. So Astro Boy has evolved over the course of time, and Tezuka like considered that to be a good thing. So it's really hard to say, well, what is is this Astro Boy as Tezuka envisioned him? It's like, well, as he envisioned him in 1960 or in 1980, because he had different views of Astro Boy during those times, which is just really, to me, really interesting. Tintin was, I think, later on. That's a good question. Because you're right, Tintin definitely has a similar vibe. A little bit earlier, so the first Tintin story premiered on January 10th, 1929. So yes, definitely long running thing. What Tezuka story would you think would be interesting as a Hollywood movie? Honestly, I think Pluto. Honestly, I think that because it does deal with these sort of existential questions. I think also the Blue Knight storyline they adapted for the 2003 anime TV series is good because it deals with the idea of robot rights around robots as this sort of oppressed race and the idea of fighting back against that, sometimes to an extreme, and the questions of extremism, I think is very relevant these days. So I think that the Blue Knight storyline would probably be very relevant. Although that would probably scare folks away. You don't want to touch that topic. So that'd be a thing. I'm sure Tintin had an influence on Astro Boy, JJ. I would bet that. Because there's very much a tone to Tintin that carries over into Astro Boy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I also think Astro Boy is a really good candidate for just telling your own story. I don't think you have to, adapt a Tezuka story straight up to tell an effective Astro Boy story. I think that is a character in a situation that does well when you say, okay, let's come up with a new villain that deals with these themes, right? And come up with a villain in a story that fits into whatever time frame we're trying to tell, right? So we're not trying to squeeze a 70 page story into our 30 minutes or what have you, right? The origins of the cat girl in anime and manga started. I've seen some stuff on that, and I could not tell you what it is. I'll be honest. I am not sure. All-purpose cultural cat girl Nuku Nuku is certainly one of the first big cat girls. In terms of protagonist of her own story, cat girl with feline traits. In terms of big popular thing, but she was certainly not the first cat girl. But yeah, you go back and there's certainly been elements of that. Although there were a fair number of dog girls early in the early time. So, but I do wonder. I'm not aware of any direct yokai equivalent to cat girls. Because you have obviously supernatural feline characters, but no real direct thing. I would think the closest thing you get is Kitsune, right? Yeah. Well, in fairness, in Pluto and Man, Astro shows up out of nowhere. right? Like folks mention Astro, and then suddenly he's there in the story, which I think is cool because this is kind of it is understandable for the universe, but yeah, I mean that's one of those things where Tezuka just invented a character and threw it in, and Astro has a sister now. Well, and I mean, note, going back here. So, the birth of Astro Boy. Actually starts with, and here's a good example. So, the birth of Astro Boy, the beginning of the volume of Astro, is this whole thing drawn by Tezuka about drawing Astro Boy. So it's, I mean, several pages in, you got Tezuka in his own manga talking about the process of making this manga. Very weird, which he drew much later, and then transitions in to this, which was the original story, which I'm sure is a redrawn version of the original story. But the thing is, like, you start with Tobio and the iconic car crash. The following page is Dr. Tenma announcing that he's going to create Astro Boy. The following page, Astro Boy is assembled on a table. It's just, all right, we're just charging forward. So yeah, and then later on, Astro Boy dies. Like Tezuka kills off Astro Boy, and eventually, obviously, brought him back to life. But he was kind of tired of Astro Boy, and he was like, I want to end this manga. But that ending was the chance for a reboot. So we did a reboot of Astro Boy's origin story. As a result of that, I was able to redraw that again. Bakaneko is a type of Japanese yokai, often confused with a Nekomata. So Bakaneko is a anthropomorphic cat, looks like. Or, a yokai cat. So a cat that has yokai qualities, supernatural qualities. But I do wonder, I mean, granted, cats have a fairly long history in Japan. They're not native, obviously. They were brought over, just like dogs and horses. But they very quickly got this sort of classic back home vibe, right? Where you had a cat in every village. And then if you're in an urban environment, you saw a cat that had cats lived in an urban environment and had this sense of, it either evoked the village life or whatever. I wonder what's going on there. That might be it might just be that kind of nostalgic thing that cats remind one of relaxed village life. Not that there are no cats in the city, but and then you get if you're gonna have a cat around, let's make her a cute girl. It does look, I don't see any shape-shifting stuff in the traditional Bakaneko stories. There's a really interesting book, which I should have over here somewhere if I still have it. There it is. Whoa! Sorry. It's all good. Called Fudoki. It's in English. It is a debut novel. It is the story of a boy. It's complicated. It starts with essentially a princess who is much later in life. She is, middle age or older, relating some of her past experience in the novel, and kind of saying this is what it's like life living in court. I have nothing to do. Kind of, it's this very staid existence, and she's kind of okay with that. Like she's accepted her lot in life, and then she starts in her diary writing the story of this cat, and this cat that then has this experience of losing its home and having to go on the road, and then turning into a woman, turning into a girl, and having this sort of transmogrification situation. And so it kind of alternates between this woman's, and this woman is alternating between, here's what happened to me today, and then here is more of my story of this cat, who is clearly a metaphor for the woman and her life, right? So she's sort of getting out a lot of what happened to her in her life through this story she's writing about. Okay, so a lot of things going on. But very interesting novel, Fudoki, by Keij Johnson. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, I really enjoyed this, and it's just a lot of levels to it, while still being entertaining. One of the things I like is that there's again a lot going on, a lot of kind of symbolism with a story that moves pretty quickly. That's pretty cool. Pet cat went missing. Got like monster in the mother's clothes. Pet cat. So yeah, there we go. Which is a pretty standard, yokai story. You're everything's going along normally, something bad happens, and then you discover that a family member is actually some monster taken on human form, and in this case, a cat. Yeah, I mean, an anime has a very specific problem with that. I think, man, is that I think that's stronger in anime. I think, like, I get a sense that fans of fantasy novels still read Lord of the Rings. There doesn't need to be any prejudice against Lord of the Rings, or Sword of Shannara, or any of the other novels from mid 20th century. But for some reason, something that old in anime is anathema. Heck, as you say, anything 30 years old in anime is anathema, which I just find weird. People just won't go back into past. And again, I think that's normal for a lot of fandoms, a lot of things, especially in the modern era, that folks just, partly because of the explosion of media, there is so much to consume that there's no need to go back. When I was getting into science fiction as a kid, you'd only get a couple of science fiction movies a year, in the theaters. I mean, you get a fair number of like pop sci-fi stuff, but stuff that was kind of light entertainment, but nothing you could really sink your teeth into. But yeah, and so we had to go back. We had to mine history. We had to go back and watch Forbidden Planet or what have you. So yeah. Digital was definitely a big turning point. A lot of folks, when digital came in, just that's the only thing to look at. Anything that's not digitally colored just looks wrong to them. And that's certainly a turning point. Which, again, I find odd. But also, again, I mean, there is so much anime from the past 20 years that you're not going to run out anytime soon. Even if you're just looking for one particular thing, one particular genre, you're going to find a fair amount of that in the past 20 years. Oh, yeah. Well, that's the problem. I mean, that's why they did the Psycho remake a couple of years ago, when they did that Psycho shot-for-shot remake. They did it because modern audiences would not watch a black and white movie. They would not watch Psycho because it was in black and white. So they did the remake. And that is something that I do not understand. But it's true. It seems to be the way people are, which is just kind of strange. Yeah, I assume you meant pre-2000, not post-2000. Like that'd be weird. Um, yeah, I mean, the other complication there, the other wrinkle is that anime budgets were just so thin around 2000 to 2006 or 7 that digital came in, but then it looked cheap because the animation was cheap and the everything was cheap about anime back then, by and large, and so you had this weird dip. But after that, things started to really come together, and they started to understand how to integrate all those systems. Hey, Solid Gumby. Like anime that reverses the tables and changes the norm for a genre, right? The norm genre in a usual way. Yes, I'm a sucker for that stuff. I'm usually interested in something that thinks, right? That is paying attention to its genre and saying, what if we change things around? Like we're talking about Buck Naked in Another World, where it's like, let's take isekai and not give the main character powers. But yeah, I'm totally glad to. I'm totally interested when folks will put things on his head. I think it's one of the reasons why I got into anime in the first place. Honestly, was the fact that I was into science fiction, and anime felt like science fiction reimagined. Project Eiko and Tenchi Muyo and the stuff I was seeing from the '90s was just, it was science fiction. It was definitely science fiction, but it was not conceptually much at all like the science fiction I was used to, and so it was just a very different set of rules, right, for what you could have in science fiction, and that I really liked. Yeah, well, I mean, 79 was a bit of a. I mean, 79 has its cheap moments, but it definitely gets better at the end. Right, yeah. I mean, I loved Recreators until it became very dumb. Um, um, oh, 0079 definitely looked a lot better than a lot of other anime at the time. Yeah. But that's because it had like some of the best animators of its day working on it. Um, you compare 0079 to like Yamato, which was like 5 years earlier, but still like whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, heck, you compare it to Galaxy Express 39s, which is coming out at the same time, and 0079 is definitely, um, you know, much more up to par. But then you compare it to Macross a few years later is quite a bit beyond 0079, right? There's a period from like 78 to 83, 84 when Japanese animation just made leaps and bounds. Partly because there was money coming in from America. Common thing. Don't have to watch anything. Yeah, that's okay. You can watch whatever you want. It is cool to do not have watched Gundam up to this point. Um, but yeah, I like a flip too. I like when something switches around. Actually, I watched Ralph Breaks the Internet yesterday, and I was kind of disappointed with it. No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. There were some times when I was kind of checking my phone, but it felt like it had such potential, and it was a very by the numbers Pixar film. It kind of hit all the story beats we would expect from a Pixar film. It has the argument between two best friends where one of them storms off. All those things are there, and it just felt like it I don't know, for a concept, for something like Wreck-It Ralph, which really reimagined a lot of things and took the idea of a video game character and really, I think, put things on its head. Ralph Breaks the Internet felt very safe, which is kind of unfortunate. Yeah, exactly, JJ. My Life is a Villainous is very much a flip, which I think is one of the reasons I'm enjoying it. Partly because it is very much, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it is very much invested in the new situation. So it's not just we're going to flip this on its head and tell the same story just inverted. It's saying, no, now that it's flipped on its head, what are the consequences of that? What story, comes out of that situation, which I really, really like. So Jaden, I'd start with original Gundam. Go back to the original 1979 Gundam and start there. And if you don't like it, that's fine. There are other things, but you can jump in there. Oh yeah, totally. I mean, there are plenty of shows. Igloo. Igloo is. It was made for Gundam fans, and it was very early on in the CGI era, and it was rough, but. Hold on. I'm pretty sure Original Gundam is on Gundam.info. Don't they have it on there? Which is not loading for me. But I think you can find 0079 on the official Gundam.info site. So I'd start there. Or, find it in various sites on the internet. I'm sure it is streaming in certain spots. But also Igloo's kind of like, what's it called? The little short films that are they're like side stories in Gundam that they did, which were interesting and kind of fill in some blanks, but are not really intended for other. They're really intended for fans, and they're more tended to say, you always wondered what this character was doing during this scene. Now you know. So yeah, speaking of fun things, I want to do my recommendation corner. So please stand by as I move some things around. Okay. I think I'm ready. I think I can talk about this. Some of you may have seen this, maybe not. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. Um, Welcome to Brent's Anime Recommendation Corner, where I'm just going to enthuse. Actually, one second. I'm going to start that again. Welcome to Brent's Anime Recommendation Corner, a little space where I just enthuse about something I love. And in this case, I'm going to enthuse about Penny Pony Dash. This is a 26-ish episode comedy anime TV series that is just wackiness all the way through. It is very, very weird. It is about this girl, Becky, who is a child prodigy who decides to, after she graduates from, I think it's Harvard, she decides to teach a Japanese high school class because that's what you do. And this class is full of all sorts of weird people that you really have to be rather forceful with. And unfortunately, Becky does not have a really great time with this, to the point where she has to, she ends up hiding behind the curtain in the classroom from all of her crazy students, including the very spacey one, as while aliens watch and talk about all of this. This is an anime series, a comedy anime series directed by Akiyuki Shinbo, who is well known for doing, let's just say, really weird symbolic anime, and that is what Penny Pony Dash is. It is a screwball comedy through the mind of a very aesthetically distinctive director. So things don't always look the way a typical anime does. Yes, there are very typical anime moments, but those are punctuated by real weirdness. Let me see if I can just show you. One of the weird things is that other than all of the main named characters, everyone else in the class is drawn absolutely identically. They literally don't matter. There's all sorts of jokes and tropes and references to all sorts of other anime series in there and science fiction. Oh, and by the way, that's God, who is trapped inside a soda machine. Or is he? Penny Pony Dash is weird. And often weirdness can just feel random. I'm not a big fan of things where it's just sort of throwing things at you to because newness is funny. That is not what Penny Pony Dash feels like. Everything in Penny Pony Dash feels like it is intentional, and that everything you see is going to be a reference to something in some way. You may not get it, you may not catch it, but there is a synchronicity to everything, as weird as it can be at times, and it can be weird. It can get really weird. This is a puppet. And yeah, that's Colonel Sanders. So yeah, this might very much, appeal to you because of that, and because of how crazy it is. And I just found Penny Pony Dash to be consistently interesting. Not only was it funny, not only was I laughing at all of the weirdness and the jokes and such, and the interactions of all the characters. And there you see all the sort of duplicate characters in the background where it's a boy model and a girl model, and they're just duplicated all the way through besides the main characters. Anyway, not only was it funny, it was always being inventive. It was always changing things around and trying new stuff out with its premise and its characters. And so when weird stuff happened, it didn't feel like the staff was desperate. It felt like that was part of the universe, and that was part of how they could introduce fresh things into the comedy, and have new premises for jokes and such like that. And what's also interesting to me is that Penny Pony Dash is kind of this weird commentary on comedy. And I'll see if I can find an example here. But sometimes when you're looking at, and yeah, there'll be these weird jokes about things all over the place. sometimes when they show, there we go. So you see how you have this sort of weird view of the classroom where you're seeing sort of the classroom in almost like letterbox. That's because you're actually pulling back and you're seeing the stage that the classroom is on, as though this was a live action comedy and the camera's just pulled back too far. And there are shots in this where you can actually see like the stage underneath and the lighting and all this. So it's very meta in many spots. It's an odd show, partly because it is examining kind of what it's not examining. Penny Pony Dash is one of those rare works that knows what it is and is willing to play around with its fundamental identity and is not too precious with its premise. So it can kind of pull back the curtain and say, hey, this is all invented. None of these characters exist. They're all just paint. And so we can play around with that. And we can have weird stuff. We can kill off a character in one episode and have them show up again in the next episode. Because it's a screwball comedy. Like, it doesn't matter. And we can make jokes about that. We can make jokes about the fact that this is not a real world. And it creates a very different tone to the series than most other comedies I've seen, where there's a certain preciousness to the concept, a certain thing that we have these characters all set up and we can't change anything. This is willing to change things. Now, character personalities do remain consistent. Like, it isn't completely reinventing itself every episode. But there's an intelligence behind Pony Pony Dash that is willing to break itself apart if it needs to for a joke, for a moment, for a punchline. And that I just really appreciated. And I just found it to be thoroughly entertaining from episode 1 all the way up through to the end. Again, it's not going to be for everybody. It's a very specific flavor. This is a pineapple, raspberry, lime punch, which is with some bourbon in it. I don't know. There's just a lot of different flavors going on. But you may just find it as delicious as I did. So hope you found this useful, and that is just me enthusing about something that I love. All right. Hopefully that all worked. See if I can transition back here. There we go. 26 episodes. There we go. Yeah, if you're gonna watch Evangelion, definitely watch a TV series. That would be the place to start. Oh wow, nice, Solari. One fun recreation of the first episode. Well, I mean, it begins with a Planet of the Apes parody sequence. Penny Pony Dash does, which is really weird. Yeah, Shinbo's weird, but he's always an interesting weird, right? Kind of like Kunihiko Ikuhara of Utena and Lesbian Bearstorm fame, where even when you don't like his stuff, you're like, but that was interesting. I was never bored. But yeah, and I wasn't lying when I said this is very much a specific taste. So I'm not surprised that some of the folks in the chat room bounced off it. I totally get that. Yeah, it's very much stuff. Key the Metal Idol, actually, which you mentioned earlier, is very much one of those where folks seem to either love Key the Metal Idol or just can't stand it. I thought it was really interesting. I thought it did a lot of it was very deliberate, right? But it also had a lot of flaws. So, Yeah, well, and it's a good question, Jaden. I mean, granted, anime is a very adaptation-heavy medium, so it could be one of those things where he's just like, "This is what makes money. This is the normal thing. This is how most of my peers work. So I'll follow that pattern at least." But he goes off in his own direction very much on that. Yeah, exactly. It's a coin flip. Any thoughts on the Knights of Zodiac manga? Nope, it's shonen. I very much bounced off Knights of the Zodiac. It just felt too traditional shonen, tropey for my taste. I'm afraid. Yeah, although I bounced off Excel Saga. Like you said, I think it is very much like Excel Saga, where you either love it or hate it. And I bounced off of it, so who knows? But they are also very similar in being these screwball comedies that are self-aware. So it's interesting that you can have two things that are kind of the same thing, but someone can like one and hate the other. I don't know. Also, just different time periods, different directors, different takes on it, right? Shinbo's a little more existential, a little more experimental than Shinichi Watanabe, who did Excel Saga. It seems to me. Yeah. I watched Excel with a friend of mine, actually, who's another big anime fan, and honestly, after like 4 or 5 episodes, we turned to each other and said, "Do you want to keep watching this? No, not. Do you want to keep watching? No, not really. Let's move on to something else." It's like, all right. I'm watching Kakushigoto. I have not. What is Kakushigoto? And I rarely know things from their Japanese names. Oh yeah, that one. I loved episode 1 of that though. I really thoroughly enjoyed that. I'll be honest, I'd be more interested in Kakushigoto if it was more about, if it was more dramatic and less comedic. I like those ideas and those stories. And I guess the problem I had, which was my problem with episode 1, is that episode 1 felt like it is going to be that gag forever. That, I had to keep this a secret from my daughter for the entire series, and it felt like that was going to get old, which is unfair. Oh, man. Eccentric Family. And that was the one we were trying to remember, by the way, the other night when we were watching all that stuff, the Kyoto Tanuki anime, The Eccentric Family. So thank you, Jaden, for reminding us. But love that art style. House of Spirit to Tommy-chan. That sounds vaguely familiar. Don't think I've seen it though. Yep, haven't seen it. Must have seen the first episode though, because it was this season, but I do not remember this series at all. Huh. Yeah, I'll be honest. This one just went in one ear out the other, unfortunately. Eccentric Family is another good example of an anime that spices things up. It tells a non-traditional story. Okay, so they had some touching bits end of every episode. Fair enough. Yeah, that trailer made it look like it was going to be more touching family drama stuff, and that tends to drag me towards the show a little more than the over-the-top comedy. But we'll see. Yeah, good point, Jaden. Kakushigoto might be a more Zetsubo Sensei sort of a work. Who knows? Why am I? One second. Hold on. One moment. Why is it so hot in here? And this room in particular is hot. The lights are all on. But I'm sweating like a stuck pig in here. That's odd. Time to strip down. No. Yeah. Yeah. And Excel Saga was big when it came out in American fandom. That was a huge, huge spike. Folks loved Excel Saga. So definitely a classic in that sense. No, you do not want to see that. Skullface Bookseller, enjoyed that. Enjoyed what I saw of it. Didn't finish it. But that was what more down my alley of that sort of weird, weird, but it's kind of, it's not understated comedy, but comedy that's more high concept, I guess, than a lot of other ones. Yeah. Magical Shopping Arcade. I had a real problem with Magic Shopping Arcade when I first started watching it, and I discovered that there was a running gag about a, spoiler alert, one of the kids, the girl, loses her panties. And that is a running gag throughout the series, apparently, that she's running around commando the entire time while wearing a relatively short dress. And that just really creeped me out, and I just couldn't get past that. And I think now that I've had more exposure to anime and also kind of the way Gainax does its thing, I'm a little bit more willing to believe that is going to be handled in a reasonable way. So I'll probably go back to that at some point. Money Drop, yeah, the ending of that Money Drop manga is a thing that apparently even the fans in Japan hated. So be aware of that. It's funny how you change as a person and as a fan. How things, when you're earlier on, you're just like, oh, that's unacceptable. And then over time, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. Yonkoi, also a Fire and Ice anime, so to speak. Fire and Ice, also an animation that a lot of folks are either love or hate. Sort of Jack Kirby inspired American animation. Frank Frazetta, excuse me, inspired animation involving a lot of muscled men and a girl in a chainmail bikini, barely a chainmail bikini. And it's just like, that's okay. Entertaining in a lot of times, but also something that a lot of folks bounce off of for a very reasonable reason. And it's very Frank Frazetta. If you're familiar with his art style, it's very testosterone Conan kind of stuff. Not all the time, but it's actually interesting if you go back and read the original Conan stories. People often use Conan as an example of sort of the classic kind of toxic masculinity, the muscle-bound hero surrounded by cowering people who's constantly having sexual conquests and all that stuff. But if you go back and read the novels, it's not like that. Much at all. Conan's usually sort of knocked back on his heels and fighting for his life. And yes, there's usually a beautiful woman in the story somewhere, but they're usually pretty competent characters. In the sense that they're usually doing pretty well in their own world and context. Yeah. JoJo's is like heavy metal. A lot of folks like heavy metal, and a lot of folks just aren't into heavy metal. It's not that they think that heavy metal is a bad genre or that heavy metal music shouldn't exist. It's that heavy metal isn't for them. And it just doesn't speak to where they are in life, right? That's JoJo for me. As I mentioned it, I think last week, I think JoJo is kind of like professional wrestling. It's over-the-top spectacle. It is very entertaining to watch a lot of the time, but not everyone watches professional wrestling, regularly, right? So that's the thing. No, I'm not saying that JoJo is heavy metal. It's a metaphor. But yeah. Why did JoJo take so long to catch on in the US even though the manga was out years ago? Because American fans don't read manga. They watch anime. By and large. You need an anime adaptation for that wide acceptance of fandom. It just seems to be the case. Black Lagoon, I have not seen Black Lagoon. I should. It looks right down my alley, but it just, it passed me by. I was watching other things when it came out, and it has not yet made it into the list. But when I've seen a Black Lagoon, I'm like, oh, ooh. That seems like my thing. Yeah, Detroit Metal City is definitely metal anime. Well, there are more manga readers. Well, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. There were a lot of manga cows back in the day. There was a huge boom in manga readership back 10, 15 years ago. So I'm not sure that there are that I'm seeing that in the fandoms that I watch. I'll put it that way. I don't know. I can't obviously speak for the entire fandom, but the folks I'm around seem to be more into anime than manga. But I also think it's definitely if there is an increase in manga readers, they are still, I think dramatically smaller than the anime audience in America. So that may have increased, one may have increased on one side, but there's still a huge offset in the anime thing. In terms of consistency, obviously, I think every anime fan has at one point picked up a manga, but we're talking about folks who read manga consistently or frequently. Yeah. Oh, and that's only talking about the American. That's a good point. I'm talking about American fans, not Japanese fans, where that's a completely different thing. Digital manga has definitely been growing in America. Yeah, fair enough, man. Different things. I did not watch Michiko and Hachin. Just again, we got another one of those shows that just didn't get to it. But I am trying to make my way through that anime canon list, so I can at least talk about ReZero and Sword Art Online, a few episodes of each of those. I've actually seen some JoJo's, so I can speak to JoJo's, which is that's great. I want to make my way through the Girls with Guns trilogy, Noir and the other two. Noir, El Cazador de la Bruja, and I'm forgetting the third one. What's the third one in that set? Which all seem just interesting. Like, unfortunately, they came out in a low, a time of low budgets, but those look really interesting. There is definitely Fist of the North Star. Fist of the North Star is a thing that exists. That's another funny thing about JoJo is folks are like, man, JoJo was completely original, and there was nothing else like it when JoJo came out. I'm like, Fist of the North Star started 3 years before JoJo. I gotta say, I think Fist of the North Star looks or JoJo looks kind of like Fist of the North Star. I'm just saying. And I'm sure JoJo brought in new things, but I think that's just betting that JoJo took some inspiration from Fist of the North Star. Just saying. Yeah, and you're right, G. And noir was a standout of that era just in general. I mean, folks were interested in noir. Yeah. Rinne, I started reading Rinne, the manga before the anime came out. Because it took a while for the anime adaptation of Rinne to start. I started the manga, and the pacing of that was just so slow that I read like 1 or 2 volumes and was like, okay, this is fun, but I kind of gonna put this down until somebody tells me something happens. And then, unfortunately, like nobody that I knew got into Rinne, so it just stayed at that point. But what I saw or read was very much classic Takahashi, where like she definitely knows how to create a lovable cast of characters, knows how to create a scenario that is a little intriguing and interesting without being just too bizarre to be non-comprehensible. So all the pieces were there. I was like, this is fun, but it's clearly kind of, it's going to be this for a few volumes. It's going to be, awkwardness among characters until things really kick into high gear for a while. So, yeah. Well, and JoJo's been popular in Japan for forever, and in America, again, I think it was partly. I think JoJo's is a couple of things. It was again, several different anime adaptations now being available in America. I think it was also fans were coming off of Naruto, they were coming off of Bleach, and they were looking for the next shonen thing, right? Attack on and the shonen that were out there like Attack on Titan and such were doing a season and then they were taking a year off. So there was now space to get into another shonen franchise. And then because there was this mystique of JoJo's being this long-running shonen series that was also influential, I think a lot of folks got into JoJo from this idea that, I am discovering this historically important thing. And so I can be seen as being into this. There's a bit of a hipster vibe to some of the early JoJo fandom. And as somebody who has done that personally, and a lot of geek archaeology is me kind of being a hipster about, I've seen all this old anime. I think there was something about that too, where they were like, ooh, here's this thing nobody else knows about, but was actually a big deal. So I think all those things helped a lot. Also, it's very meme worthy. It's perfect for the internet. It's very easy to make GIFs of JoJo that either JoJo fans find awesome or non-JoJo fans just think are very bizarre and thus pass on to everyone else. But yeah. And also, I mean, it was whoever knows why something has become super popular at a time. People have been theorizing about the success of Marvel movies, and I still think now is the right time for that. Like I don't think you can be too precious about psychoanalyzing why Marvel movies are hugely popular right now. I think some things just have that right combination, and it's just all the luck of all those pieces being in place, and then gaining enough momentum, right? Like Lucas says about Titanic, right? Why was Titanic the biggest movie of its year? There were certainly fields, there's certainly elements of it, but there's no, you know, you can't prove the Titanic should have been as incredibly popular as it was. You can't prove why Star Wars Episode 4 should have made and been as successful as it was that year. Things just happen. And you're right, RX-0, that's the other thing about popularity, is that popular things are generally pretty safe. They're generally pretty, there is a saying among science fiction fans, which I'm going to mangle, that popular media tends to be kind of like pre-chewed food. It's very easy, it's very palatable, but it's very much recycled. And that's the thing, right? Partly because that is how something, when you think about it, that is how something is going to be popular. Because it's going to how do you appeal to the mass audience without appealing to everything at once, right? You can't be quirky and appeal to a large audience. That is almost by definition, incompatible. So you have to be very, you have to speak to the broad audience. Right. That's why re-releases work, because it's like, oh, here's the thing you liked. Here's more of the thing you liked. Pro tip.
This is a reminder. Get ready to go to bed.
All right. I live alone, so I need a reminder to let me know what time it is
Get ready to go to bed.
when it gets late. What was I talking about? Turn A Gundam. Turn A Gundam, speaking of Gundam earlier, was kind of, I think, a message from Gundam's creator to its fans saying, hey, stop wanting the same thing over and over again. Heck, the second season of Haruhi Suzumiya, I think, is very much and explicitly a letter to anime fans addressing the problematic, precisely that desire of anime fans to just get the same thing over and over again. So yeah. Yeah, there's a problem living alone. It's like I can get really deep into something and just forget what time it is. So I need a little bit of something to say. Oh, by the way, it's getting late at night. Of course, I always ignore it and stay up till 2 a.m. Watching Netflix. But what can you do? So yeah, that is that. JJ, I know it's late. I don't know if JJ's still around. Yes. JJ, do you still want to talk about the news? Do you want to try that out? I have not gotten a chance to see if there's anything about the news that you wanted to talk about. I'm seeing something going on there. Cool. All right, let's give that a try then. I'm going to fire that up, and we can talk for a little bit at least. We will probably have to do the headset, just FYI. And I'm going to go ahead and start a video call, and we're going to try a little conversation here, and we will see how this goes. Also, I might see if I can route the audio around a little bit. There's the mute. All right. I see you. Okay. That is not working. I'm getting like every third word at best. I'm getting nothing now. We're hearing nothing. So that's kind of odd. If maybe your microphone is just not working there. Yeah, no, that's not coming in. That's weird. Yeah, we're just getting kind of on this end. Yeah, R2D2. We're using Discord for this as an easy connection thing. If that doesn't work, we might try Zoom, actually. Yeah, still getting just weird sort of electronic distortions. That's weird. Barely getting anything. Still basically nothing. Huh. Now we're getting just, every little bits. Yeah. You're turning into Daft Punk, sadly. Yeah, that's just not working at all. So let me try hanging up here and trying Zoom. See if maybe that'll come in some other place. We'll see if that. Or wait, I think JJ's trying something else. Nope, I hear nothing. I hear nothing. Huh. Maybe there's some microphone issues on that end. Let me try hanging up here and seeing if Zoom is any happier. It could also be the fact that your video coming in is giving me some internet issues. So we're gonna try that. I will give me one moment. We're gonna disconnect that, and then we are going to. I'm gonna pull up another connection. We're gonna give that a try, and if that doesn't work, that's fine. We may try again next week. Hold on. That's fine. And then we do this. All right. We'll see if that works out. Apologies as we figure everything out. JJ became an alien. Matrix. There are just so many of these options. We have had better luck with Zoom in the past, but nothing that bad with Discord. So Discord was never that funky. So hopefully. And yes, and man, the Gundam Origin manga are amazing. Definitely very helpful. Give you a lot of context, a lot of information about stuff that went on around original Gundam. Electromagnetic Girlfriend. I've not seen that. Sorry. I've not read Orange Road. Tried the anime and could not stand the MC, sadly. Best of luck, Jaden. The real world is awesome. Okay. See if there's any better. We're still connecting and getting all that stuff working.
The real world is awesome. How's that for audio?
Way better.
Okay, so I'll leave the headset off.
Okay.
Better.
Unfortunately, I'm now hearing me on you. So we're now getting me echoed on your side.
Yes, I think it's because the actual speakers are echoing.
Yeah. Can you do just the headphones and not the microphone?
Now getting me echoed on your side. Oh God. Okay, let me go back to the headset.
Yep. Also, sorry everyone, this is really weird. I'm also muting my microphone on his end. Hold on, I gotta. There we go.
Anything for that?
Okay. I am speaking now, and we'll see if I hear you on your end. No, this is working perfectly.
Okay.
This is exactly right. Yay!
That's exactly right. Well, it's something.
It is.
Okay.
It is a thing. In fact, this is something right. We might be able to do something a little odd. We might be able to do this on the phone. This is going to be an interesting one. Can I can duplicate that. Someone else. So now, if I take this and I change the transform on this, I'm going to change the transform, JJ.
Okay. Transform and roll out.
Exactly.
Autobots.
Close. We'll transition to this. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. And we actually have, like, people all at once. This is kind of odd. But kind of odd and awesome. So, hope you don't mind being on camera there.
No, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
It's just the question is, how long will the camera be able to keep focused on my face before it explodes?
It's all good.
I'm not exactly a Brad Pitt candidate here.
Don't worry. Let's see here. There was a story of. Do you ever watch Community, the sitcom?
No. Ever since I dropped cable, I watch anime and that's it.
There's a guy on there who's he plays the wacky dean. So you can imagine what a wacky dean would look like. And one day he was in a casting call for some similar character, and he said, "I don't know what kind of person you're looking like." And they're like, "We're looking for somebody like you. You're TV ugly."
TV ugly. Wow.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
I don't even know what that means, but anyway.
I've just never heard of TV ugly before. Also tonight, I had never heard of Animusic.
Yeah, that is apparently a thing.
Like for my music playlist for my iPhone, I have it listed as anime J-pop. I never thought to call it Animusic.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's see here. So before we go any further, N-Man, you asked, Mobile Suit Gundam was anime first. Original thing, it was anime. And then the manga, that, or that, depending on whoever you're talking, whoever you're looking at, are adaptations by one of the original creators of what they originally wanted to do with the story, but never had the time to do in the anime adaptation. So it is quasi canon in the sense that like you never do in the anime what you intended to do. You never the resulting thing that comes out is never exactly what you planned to do at the beginning, right? So this is kind of all those ideas thrown into the manga. So yeah, it's complicated, but it was the first Gundam was anime. Just to get that explained. Okay, so we're going to talk about the news. This was an interesting week for the news.
Well, it's interesting to see the announcement of all the new animes that are coming out, and yet every day there's announcements about the current seasons that are delayed because of COVID.
Yep.
And that's what I find kind of funny, because it's like, that's super you guys are announcing this, but is this going to be one of these things where it's like, yeah, you're going to have such and such, and that's going to be 2022, or like winter 2021, not 2020 2021, but literally 2021 into 2022. So that I was kind of amused by. And then a lot of the stuff about the game tie-ins.
Yeah.
The quintessential quiz game tie-in. I was kind of, mind you, maybe it's just me, but I was kind of hoping the quintessential quince was going to be like a dating thing.
Oh, of course.
Versus like a puzzle kind of thing. I'm like, let's see, whatever. and then again, like the comments I had said, I thought Tanya, the saga of Tanya the Evil, would be much better as like a first-person shooter,
Yeah.
or maybe even like kind of an RPG kind of thing. You know what I mean? Would that be kind of funky to roll up your mage?
Yeah,
who are you fighting for?
I was expecting like a tactical StarCraft-esque sort of war game.
That would have worked as well too.
Yeah.
I mean, make it not only just frontline trench fighting, but also sort of expansive into the greater campaign function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although I think on the other hand, I am sure that there have been mobile games for every anime you can think of for the past 10 years. They've just been Japan only, right?
It's a very popular tie-in, and
Yeah.
I know there's a fair number of people I know who play a lot of the mobile gaming little. They look like side scrollers because it's typically just your player character fighting another on a little background.
Yep.
And that's easy enough to do, I suppose, but it's like with a franchise like Tanya where you could do so much more, making a little mobile game just seems kind of like, you're just sort of keeping the cash cow going, and it's not really about developing something that really would fit so well in with such a great franchise,
And this is what I think is so fascinating, is that I think we are now at a point with American anime fandom and technologically where all these mobile games are now kind of relevant to the Western fandom. So now like we get the announcements where I think 3-5 years ago it would come out in Japan and we'd never hear about it. Or maybe it would be a quick scrolling headline, whatever. But now folks are like, oh, Tanya the Evil mobile game. I might, find a way of grabbing that.
Well, that leads to the sort of next question is, were the mobile games a Japanese announcement or were they a global announcement? So is it in English and in Japanese, or is this just the sort of first flush where it's Japanese only and then it will come out later in English version?
Yeah, I think most of these were Japanese only. Because it was,
Okay.
just announcing that.
I know certainly the console video game one that was in the upper right corner that you showed.
Yeah.
Not console, but like arcade game box. That's probably a hard call to find an arcade in America to have that. Just saying.
Yeah. Oh, you made me sad.
Hey, I believe there's still. It's not Player One that's in Greensboro, but
wow.
definitely Lost Ark has their own sort of Japanese rhythm game and other Japanese games in Greensboro. There are some places that do that.
There's a collector near me that built a building on his property to house his collection of 200 plus arcade games.
Oh.
Yeah. And he used to do a monthly open house. Everything would be free play, and you just show up. Yeah. I think a year or two ago he just stopped doing it. And I suspect it was one of those things where enough folks came in and scuffed the carpets, or the general public just kind of degraded a little bit over time to the point where he was like, no, I don't have to do this anymore.
That's terrible.
Yeah. And I really wish I regret not taking advantage of that now.
Well, as I say, I wonder, having closed it to the public, has any news or information been out about what he's done with it subsequently? So, you've got a lot of friends, Brent, in low places. Might as well make another one.
I would love to do a feature for you on my YouTube channel. If I could just come show up and play some video games for a while.
Exactly. Nothing wrong with that.
So it's interesting. I do find it. I do wonder what impact the Western audience has on the development of these games. Like, can the Western audience get big enough and, ask enough to get an English adaptation of some of these things, especially quintessential quintuplets, right? Not the biggest anime of the year,
No.
but a decent fan base. Can they get loud enough to get an English adaptation of that mobile game? I don't know.
Well, I mean, years ago, that's odd to say it, but years ago, when I ran across Shuffle and Shuffle Memories, I had no idea that Shuffle was a game.
Okay, yeah.
And it got made into an anime, and I loathe the anime. But I watched it because, I do that. They had available an English dubbed or subbed, I guess version of the game.
Okay.
And that game came out like 15 years ago. And it took time, but it got there to a point where there was an English available game of Shuffle. So I think given that time period, way back then, that for a mobile game, they're going to adapt this to an English audience. It might not be, the month after it releases in Japan, but I would almost bet if they could squeeze a nickel out of it in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's the other fascinating thing is that it used to be a mobile game was something that you fired off and you got out there because it had a shelf life of like 3 to 6 months. It was a clicker, and so you would do it, and it would kind of spike and die. But these days, mobile games have they have a long life. They'll have they were talking about this. This is the 3-year anniversary of this mobile game being out.
Yep.
So they definitely have the staying power.
Well, and given that anybody who is releasing by license content to Crunchyroll or Funimation or Hulu or whatever, outlet is streaming this stuff. It's super that, I'm sure they're aware that there's a lot of simulcasting going on, but there's also quite a great backlog of stuff out there so that, it might not be as super necessary to keep this immediately in the same time space as the show. And that, you will have some people who will come back to this. And if your primary audience is really Japan anyway, then your secondary audience, if somebody in America comes on your show 2 years later and this mobile game is still out there and you make 10 cents out of it, you've already had your run in Japan. So, you know what I mean? It's just some extra that might come in. It's not a super huge issue.
Yeah. I wonder, and I think also there are so many more options now. There's a story this week that they're going to release a Pac-Man essentially level editor. So you'll be able to access this thing and build your own Pac-Man. You can play Pac-Man, build your own levels, do all this stuff within Twitch. So you will, So you will log into you will go to a Twitch channel and it will load this user interface. This is launching next month, apparently. It will load this user interface where you can build Pac-Man levels and play them in the browser right there and then stream it on Twitch.
I really had no idea that Twitch had that functionality because I've been watching a friend of mine, play whatever his game on Twitch, and it's basically, I thought, was just, streaming what was on their desktop and hearing their voiceover. I didn't realize Twitch did more than that.
This is the first, apparently, anyone's ever heard of this functionality. Like, this is going to be the premiere of this possibility. But
and it's probably going to be slightly disastrous for at least a little while.
Well, I'm glad they're starting with Pac-Man and not Horizon Zero Dawn.
But even Pac-Man, that's not it's not as simple as just point and click necessarily. I mean, you kind of sort of have to have an idea of the architecture of what's going on in there to be able to edit it and do things with it. So.
Yeah, I'll be very curious. But you think between Twitch, Steam, Good Old Games, the handful of various game stores out there, major game stores, consoles, PC, all these options for games, iOS, Android. I think there's, given the fact that there is such a robust market for anime adjacent video games, I think if you're going to make one, you might as well make one. You can find some platform on which you can make something, even if it's a an Evangelion jigsaw puzzle, it's gonna sell.
That's true, but it in my mind at least, it sort of comes to the front of it's when does the actual fandom sort of step forward and say, you know what, thank you for making an Evangelion puzzle game, but I hate you, and it was a terrible idea, and you need to burn in hell for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like we've said it a lot of times in the chat where it's like, money. Money does this, money does that, money drives things.
Yep.
That's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
But horrible, horrible ideas for that extra nickel. Sometimes I would wish there would be some, dumpster fires and protests. You know what I mean?
It's why I find this is so fascinating. Is that Gainax? One of the reasons Gainax stayed in business during the '90s with all of their horrible business practices, and inability to do things, was by making an Evangelion strip poker game, which is highly questionable in multiple ways, but it kept the company afloat. It made money, and people look back on that and say how shameful, but at the same time it's they were like, this was what sold. This is what people were looking for. So I always wonder those things, and obviously every time something comes out that people put money into, it's because they thought it would make money, right? They assumed that the fans would respond in some way, but what is the then longer term impact of that, right? At what point are you burning bridges down the road to make your money and to keep things rolling in the short term?
Well, if you really want to take a good lesson from history, just look at the Atari 2600.
Yeah.
Or the Atari 1500. You have money making, and just open-ended licensing to terrible game producers. Mm-hmm. And in the end, what did that do? It killed Atari. Yeah. You know what I mean? You had better games that came out with much tighter controls on licensing, and in general, better quality control. Nintendo, Coleco. I don't know why Coleco went out, because Coleco was a good game system. Intellivision was an interesting game system, but you know what I mean? Atari just sort of, they tried hard to make the best money they could and didn't really pay too much attention to it. So I think that ultimately helped to bury Atari.
There's a really good documentary about this on Netflix right now, where they dive into that, and you're absolutely right. One of the big problems they had was that they very much initially they very much focused on building a library of solid games, and then it shifted into, we have to make money off of the Atari 2600 for as long as possible. A new console is not worth thinking about. We're just going to milk this console for all it's worth. And
that was what was funny about releasing the 1500 on the 10th anniversary, 15th anniversary of the 2600. Mm-hmm. It was the same damn console. I mean, it fit the game cartridges from the 2600 entirely. I mean, there was nothing new about it. It's just there's only so far in that day and time where you had the NES. Why would you bother playing with the 1500 to just relive the 2600 experience? I mean, it's ridiculous. But that's what makes me think about these things where you have these mobile game things sometimes, that the way that they're sort of thrown in there, it's you're doing your thing, you're keeping it alive, you're doing what you need to do, and when you get down to it, if you don't do it well, then you get a lot of hatred. Yeah. And gosh knows, otakus are a weird group to have to hate you.
We're a small group, relatively speaking, and that's the problem. Is that once you build that reputation, it's really hard to shake it.
yeah, but you're relying on this weird small group of people to really invest their hard-earned dough to buy all this crap. You know, so it's like that's just, you know, I understand there's people who would buy something like a Tanya mobile game just because it's got Tanya in it.
Sure.
But you know what I mean? It's like I have to think somebody is sitting there in a greater sense of it going, you know, I don't care if you know what Tanya is, if it's quality, somebody who'll play it. You know what I mean? Somebody who's on a Nintendo Switch. If I make this decent game and it has Tanya in it, they're going to get it because it's a decent game.
Yep.
Versus something where it's like, oh, look, it's a group of wallpapers and you just swipe left and right. You know what I mean? It's like, that's money making, but that's not quality making, and that's not reputation making.
Yeah.
Well, it's poor ass reputation making. But, you know what I mean? You know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, totally. It's weird. I mean, I think, and the other side of that coin too is that, you know, if Bandai Namco is creating a ReZero game or, you know, whatever,
which actually looked like it was a little fighter game with a bunch of little characters in it. So I'd like to play it to see what it's like.
You know, if Bandai Namco has their property, which they're making a video game out of, you know, I have reasonable expectations that will turn into a, you know, playable, enjoyable game. It's when Azure Lane, which, okay, that was originally a mobile game. You know, when what's a good example? The fishing anime. The fishing club,
which I'm enjoying. The fishing club anime. Yes.
If somebody announced, "Hey, so good news, we found a Taiwanese company that's willing to pay for the rights to make a mobile game out of this," I'd be like, fingers crossed. But, you know, that could be anything. That could just be, you know, here's some cash and we'll throw together something and hopefully we'll make money. You know, there's just such a wide variance in quality in the video game space in general, but especially mobile games.
Well, the interesting part is that I know I've heard not, you know, too long ago about the massive mobile gaming market in China.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a massive gaming market in Japan as well, but you figure numerically, the Chinese gaming market is much bigger.
1 billion versus yeah.
So it, you know, I wonder what kind of cross pollination that there is, where people who are making mobile games in Japan are saying we could source this out to people who are making it for 1 billion people. This might be a way to save a few nickels, but, you know, also might give us a little of the greater quality on it because they're going through a lot more pressure for 1 billion people to attract more attention. So the quality hopefully would be somewhere that would follow that.
I also wonder, and this is something I do not know, given the similarities between the Japanese written language and the Chinese written language, how hard is it to, like, physically fit Chinese dialogue into the same space as Japanese dialogue? Like, one of the big problems with adapting, right, something for America is that, you know, the dialogue just doesn't take up the same amount of space. So you have to kind of figure out how all that's going to fit. And I wonder if Chinese is actually easier, or at least, you know, it kind of maps more one-to-one to Japanese dialogue because they're based on the same, you know, hundreds of years ago.
If you go through, like, the translator, Google Translate, you can translate things into what it says Chinese traditional or Chinese simplified. So I'm wondering whether you've got something sort of like that, where you've got the one-to-one can be closer if you take the simplified Chinese and the sort of simplified Japanese and sort of, you know what I mean? I wonder if they're closer in space.
Exactly.
That you can do that versus, you know, if you ever remember the Kung Fu Saturday afternoons in the 70s and 80s, where the dubs over the Chinese films were just Chinese spoken doesn't match with English spoken in a way,
At
so
all.
you just got a lot of mouth movement and things going on where there's no words coming out. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Solari makes a good point in the chat that also China doesn't have as big of a own your own hardware market. So like there's not a huge install base of PlayStations or Xboxes, but everyone has a mobile phone. So I think gaming is going to have a much larger penetration on that, internet cafes and so forth, compared to other markets. Obviously there are a lot of PlayStations sold in Japan, but Chinese export or import restrictions and all that are going to have all sorts of interesting effects.
Well, that's really interesting that they don't have their own your own gaming hardware culture.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Considering that like 99% of all the gaming stuff is made in China.
Yeah, and certainly PC's big over there.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and it could be one of those things. Now, I do know, so this is an interesting thing. There's a lot of clones of like early consoles over there because copyright law was different, and so you could clone a 2600 and sell it in China because they didn't have laws against doing that.
The little Chinese loophole where if you're not registered with your copyright in China, then you could be cloned entirely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting.
So that existed, but then in 1983 there were not let's just say that the Chinese economic miracle was still developing. So not everyone had the money for a console. So and then I wonder just what the impact of all those things when you think we have the console wars over here and in Japan, and those aren't necessarily penetrating China because China isn't really importing that stuff. It would obviously be available, but they're not necessarily opening the floodgates to buy hundreds of millions of those things. And actually, the more I think about it, I don't know that Japan would have been like anxious to produce an extra, 500 million consoles for the Chinese market. Like that might be a market that they were hesitant to support because of its scale and because of the difficulty. So this ties into something I was reading earlier this week about, and it's basically an analysis of Asian pop culture and its expansion into Japanese pop culture and its expansion into Asia. So how has Japanese pop culture been popular in China, Taiwan, etc.? And they said there was this interesting thing that happened in the 80s where the Japanese music company said, we have the best idea ever. We're going to export the Japanese pop idol system to the rest of Asia. So we're going to set up TV competitions, open mic auditions. We're going to set up distribution channels, and we're going to do the same thing we do over here for Morning Musume and all of our, big pop idols. We're going to go over to China and say, hey, we will produce these things. We'll produce it here with your people, with your staff, but we will kind of export our procedure to your country. And so they started doing, essentially America's Got Talent style shows and all sorts of things to find the next great idols, and that worked great in Malaysia and it worked great here. And they set this up in China. They had this giant TV show, and they had all these CDs they were producing. Can you guess what happened in China?
It was a remarkable failure by chance?
It was a remarkable failure. Can you guess why?
I really would wonder why, because I would think you would have a culturally relevant idol market or popular music. I would think you would have something that would be relatively equivalent.
Absolutely. They found musicians. Everything was great. They were going to go and produce the albums, and the Chinese government stepped in and said, "Nope.
Oh.
We have decided not to allow this anymore."
The central state. Not thought about that part.
And Japanese staff were like, "This was fine 2 weeks ago." Yep. Nope. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And so this researcher came back to them years later, and they were like, "Yeah, so this was not as easy as we thought it would be." And then they done it in other countries where it went well, but then there were just tweaks to distribution systems, and sales of albums were different, where people were buying singles versus album, whatever, and so just things didn't map exactly the same way they expected it to. And so it worked, and it was generally effective, but in China they're like, "Yeah, that was a disaster. That didn't work." So I wonder if
that's always the interesting part about the massive market that it is. That I'm sure a lot of industrialized nations that are around China would love to theoretically have a slice of.
Yep.
That just, you oftentimes forget it's not just a market economy. It's a controlled by a central government market economy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, wow. Damn.
Yeah.
Those things that wake you up at the moment, or you think your good idea is going to go somewhere, but oh boy.
Yeah.
Damn.
Can't fight City Hall.
Yeah. Well, especially when City Hall can just kick you out of the country.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's that simple.
Well, and then another thing this book brought up is that, to put it delicately, Japan's historical record in the rest of Asia doesn't make them the most popular, tourist. So yeah, that's also a factor.
Yeah, that's why I didn't say the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. Because that they've been aching for a slice of China for a long time, and it didn't go so well.
Yeah.
Well, so well. It was disastrous. More so than a failed business deal.
Yeah.
Things happen historically. But yeah, I thought those were some interesting elements for the news this week.
Yeah.
All the anime announcements that will be ultimately delayed, and all of the mobile games that we may or may not see anytime in the near future. Some good stuff.
Yeah.
You didn't do the anime history of the week?
Oh, you're right. I completely forgot. It's Shinichiro Watanabe's birthday. This
holy
week.
crap.
Yeah. So notable person.
Yeah, no joke.
So I might just record that Sunday or something. Might just hop on and record that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's one of those things that I usually look forward to is the history of anime, unless you actively say there's nothing going on this week, in which case I can believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to fill in, but there are some gaps.
There's some gaps.
There are some weeks where I'm like, yeah, I can't find anything that happened, this week in history.
I thought you were talking about the audio. I'm like,
No,
we're going bad again. I have not seen anything lately. What's Kill Annie doing?
Ooh.
We haven't had an update on that in some time, and it just occurred to me. It's like, the building's gone.
Mm-hmm.
There's been no subsequent news about what's going on in that space. And where are their new facilities, or have they not even moved to that point?
Right, that's a great question. Last I heard, they had a new facility, and they were beginning the process of moving into that facility, but then COVID-19 happened, and they were like, but again, the anime industry is weird about co-location, so they may have said, okay, some of us are going to work there, some of us won't. I don't know. And that's true. There were, that was one of multiple Kill Annie buildings. Good, thank you, Jaden. Worth pointing out that was, one of their main ones, but not the only Kill Annie building.
That's something I didn't know. I honestly thought that was their only facility.
Yeah, no, there are a few others.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, not that makes anything better, but you know,
Yeah.
that's total loss versus like a tragedy at one facility.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's tough, and also I know they said, don't expect anything out of us like this year. They were doing the Violet Evergarden, some Violet Evergarden thing, and they said, that will probably come out. We have things we want to do this year, but if everything gets delayed past this year, don't be surprised. Which, again, understandable with everything else.
There's so much that they're going to have to work through, just psychologically more so than just the physical spaces of things. And COVID's not very helpful, because that's now you not only have your concerns from what happened, but also the concerns that if somebody's sick in there, how that might impact things. And it's like, dude, that's just not,
Yeah.
I guess we're all going to be sensitive human beings and say, whenever they get to it, they get to it.
Yeah. And we're lucky in a sense in that they weren't like in the middle of releasing a TV series. Right? So it wasn't like, we're waiting with bated breath to see how a particular story ends. So at least they can kind of get back up to speed with their next projects. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it makes me think, I've talked to you before about Kaze no Stigma, the stigma of the wind. And it was an ongoing anime happening.
Oh, okay.
The whole thing was rolling right along. The creator passed away, and there was no more story. And that was it. So it was like, you know what I mean? Not that, them working in the middle of a, season of something wouldn't continue, but, that kind of idea where it's like, things just stop. And you're, kind of moment.
Yeah. Satoshi Kon and his final film, where that was like a quarter complete, I think, when he passed away. And he asked the president of Madhouse to finish it for him. And the president of Madhouse said, okay. And then Kon passed away, and he looked at it and he was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to finish. I'm not that man. I can't figure this out. And so it's been sitting there for years, and it goes around, and everyone else is like, I'm not Satoshi Kon either. I'm sorry. I want to, everyone is like, we want to see this completed, but no one can, wrap their heads around the project. It's rough.
Well, see, isn't that one of those things where the creator's notes help out? I mean,
sure.
Does no one have any notes from him, or was it just was Kon's entire concept in his own head?
Well, no, I mean, they have storyboards and all that, but also apparently, like, it was a very personal film. It was his first kids film, and so it had this very particular tone that he was going for. And it was one of those things where it's also the problem that like Ghibli always had, where they would bring somebody in to, or they would start working on a new film, and everyone would go around, and Miyazaki would go around and say, okay, who wants to direct? Like, who's going to be the next big director here? We need somebody else to take over from me, and everyone would go, not me.
Not me.
Because no one wants to take on the mantle of Hayao Miyazaki Jr., right? Like no one wants that public eye on them as, oh, you're taking over from Hayao Miyazaki. Well, let's look at your works now, right? That's tough.
Nobody wants to play hot potato with that title.
Exactly.
God.
Especially considering like what happened with Tales from Earthsea and that whole debacle. I don't know if you're familiar with that story.
No, I don't think I have.
That was let's see here. So they licensed the Ursula K. Le Guin novel, actually like several of the novels, I think. And then I think Hayao Miyazaki was going to do it, and then he got involved in working on something else. And so...
So he was not signed on yet? He just had sort of kind of...
Yeah.
little bit of agreed, but not.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Ghibli had decided to do it, but Hayao hadn't decided to do it.
Okay.
So it was sort of sitting there floating at the studio, if I'm recalling correctly. The important thing being that they were like, this movie needs to get made. And so Hayao Miyazaki's son, Goro Miyazaki, was tapped. And he was running the Ghibli Museum. He is not an animator. He has no experience in this, but he is also the, son of Hayao Miyazaki. So he was kind of familiar with how it all worked. And when
as familiar as a museum director could be, right?
Exactly. And obviously, running the museum, he had a lot of access, a lot of materials, so he was familiar with all that stuff. And apparently the pitch, and some of this has come out later, that basically they said, look, the way this studio makes money is directors directing anime. So there needs to be a director on this. Will you do it? This is how we pay for the museum, for example, right? So Goro said, "Fine, I'll do it." He was interested, and so he took it over, and obviously Hayao would check in on it, and then Hayao started going to the media and saying, "Boy, Goro's doing a terrible job. I really don't like the way he's doing it." And he just has no eye for it. He's not the right person for it.
He's not telling his son this, is he?
Probably. They had conversations at work that were unpleasant. And again, it has come out. Apparently, Hayao basically said, or Hayao's perspective was basically, what does this non-animator think he's doing? Why did he agree to take it on in the first place? He should have refused. It is dishonorable to be sort of essentialist for him to have agreed to do this at all. He should have just not done it at all. And this became a big thing. And then Goro, of course, was asked to comment, putting him in a very, uncomfortable situation. Whereupon he started saying, well, yeah, my dad, boy, didn't see much of him growing up. Because he was at the studio all the time.
Oh.
And he's an amazing director. Don't get me wrong. He is the most amazing director. But as a father, there's a quote from him at one point during this where he said, Hayao Miyazaki is a brilliant director, but a goose egg of a father. Which is a really fun environment in which to make a movie.
That's also a very interesting thing to say in a public forum where, most Japanese family life is not quite so out in the open.
Yeah. So the movie comes out and it stars this prince who, first thing in the movie, he stabs his father and runs away.
Oh, God.
Yeah. That's the inciting incident.
Don't need to be Freud to figure that one out, do you?
And when the movie came out, there's a great interview where somebody called him on this and said, I couldn't help but notice. And Goro said, honestly, that was not the intent of the scene. The scene was there to, as an inciting incident, but I can see where you're coming from. I appreciate what that is, and I cannot deny that there might have been something in the back of my mind subconsciously, putting that in there. So yeah. And so Goro ended up, he did Ronya the Robber's Daughter, which is a all CGI TV series, which apparently is well respected, and he and Hayao made up. They understand each other, and they came to an understanding.
Nobody got stabbed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. But
it's a happy ending.
But when Hayao Miyazaki won't let his own son take over for him, oof. So this is why Ghibli is running this sort of skeleton crew for its next movie, and why it's taking 20 years to make Miyazaki's next film, because it's kind of gotten to that point where it's like, well, we're gonna make whatever Hayao Miyazaki wants to make, at whatever pace he wants to make, with whatever staff is willing to work with him.
How old is he now?
80 something, I think, like 82 ish. I can look that up.
Oh boy, we're running out of time.
That's the thing. Like, Miyazaki has famously retired, I think, 7 times so far. But let's see here. He is 79. And even Suzuki has said, yeah, this is probably it. Like, I don't, I keep pushing him to make more movies, but even I have to recognize that he's reaching the end of his energy, sadly.
Yeah, as to say, now if he's got ideas, I hope and pray that he is documenting them for people to do something with the ideas.
And this is the other.
But yeah, I mean, he's going to get to a point where he's going to actually retire.
And this is the other problem, is that he probably has 2 more retirements left in him.
2 more. Very, very short retirement,
Yeah.
6 months at a time, just enough to go to Hawaii and hang out on the beach for a while and then come back.
Yeah. But he, the way he writes his movies is that he basically sketches ideas, and does various sketches of different scenes he wants, and then he storyboards. And he this actually came out recently where Suzuki, and again, it's one of those things where, wow, okay. Suzuki said, so you want to know how Miyazaki writes his movies? He comes up with an idea, he sketches things out, he eventually comes to, he draws something that he thinks is his sort of key image for the movie. Like, what is representative of the movie? So the poster for Spirited Away of Sen sort of looking out at you with the blackness in the background and kind of the bathhouse kind of in the distance, just kind of standing there. That was his key image for the movie. That he drew. He was like, I want this idea of this girl who is vulnerable, but is like she's growing a spine, right? So he'll draw that, and then he will announce a press conference, and he will tell people, I am doing a new movie. And then he will have maybe 20% of it, 20% of the plot in his head at that point. He will then
So he has a key visual.
Yep.
And says, I'm making a movie. Everybody gets excited, and there's nothing like really anything but that key visual.
Pretty much. He has lots of sketches he's drawn of just different ideas. And he knows in his head, like, where it's going. And then he sits down and he starts drawing storyboards. And he will literally just start storyboarding the movie. And then as he's doing the storyboards, they start handing that off to background artists and animators and so forth to work on it. And he said, like, by the time they get like 20% of the movie assembled, he has maybe 50 to 70% of the movie storyboarded, but he still doesn't necessarily have his ending yet. Yeah. And so they keep on working and building stuff, and he has this crisis, and he will apparently then like go off for a week to kind of figure out what's going to happen. Then he comes back and goes, I've cracked it, I figured it out. And then he kind of, ends up storyboarding. But like, they're making the movie, and they still can't be sure that he's going to figure out the ending at the end.
That's serious cred. You know what I mean? There's like very few people in this world that could get that kind of like, okay, let's just wait for him to figure out what's going on, and then we'll go forward. Versus, I would imagine the standard would be like, okay, this is nice, you have an idea. Let's see your script for this. Let's see your key animations. Let's see all your storyboarding, and then we'll decide if we're gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow.
No.
When it's your studio, I guess you've got that kind of cred. It's just I can't imagine what these people must be thinking when they're sitting there waiting for the the wise old monk to like spit out the rest of the film.
And that's the thing is it is a fundamentally kind of frustrating way to work because you're drawing something and you have no idea where the scene that you're making is leading. You don't know the implications of the scene you're drawing. You don't know what it's going to connect to in the future because it's not even in Miyazaki's head yet. So yeah. And some folks are fine with that, right? They're like, okay, that's just how it works here. But it's not for everyone. And Suzuki apparently finds this, and again, getting back to the earlier point. Oh, hello. The fact that Suzuki is kind of coming out to folks saying, so here's what I live with every day, implies that he's a little bit, frustrated.
It's amazing. Oh, and I just went all dark in here.
Yes, you did.
Dang. Well, you can sort of kind of see me. Wow, wish I had a flashlight.
It's geek archaeology after
I
dark.
Lost the light bulb.
Oh no. Okay.
Well, that's fine. Well.
Audio
the
only,
after
right?
dark period.
Right, exactly. Oh gosh. But yeah, I mean, it is a very unique way of working, and I can understand why folks are a little I don't want to say. I can understand why the studio has evolved the way it has. Put it that way. Why it's not churning out, a movie a year. It's like, well, unique situation.
Well, what's that mean overall for the studio when he is finally actually really retired?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, is that it? Is it done? No more museum, no more anything. It's just all wrap it up. Theme park's gone.
Yeah, honestly, I think what'll happen, knowing Suzuki, who is a shrewd businessman, if he's still around, I think basically the studio will shut down, but Ghibli will continue as a museum theme park. It will be Disney. It will just keep on profiting off of all of that for as long as it can.
Well, I mean, one could argue, if you want to make a comparison over to like Walt Disney. Walt Disney died.
Yep.
All of his ideas and things that he was doing with Walt Disney Imagineering, all that stuff stopped.
Mm-hmm.
But the Disney Studios carried on.
Kinda.
The theme parks carried on.
Yeah.
But those theme parks are in large measure funded by obviously their own operations, but also as part of the media empire that Disney is, that helps to feed into that. So if you don't have the studio anymore, you know what I mean? It's like, is that just going to leave the museum and the theme park to wither and die on the vine?
Well, you consider that. Oh gosh, was it Bob Iger who said that? I forget, but after Walt passed, can you think of a film that the Disney Studios produced over the next 20 years before Little Mermaid that had any impact on the parks? Until the new Renaissance.
Well, didn't Dark Cauldron? That was Little Mermaid before. That was before Little Mermaid, and that was terrible. But there was a Dark Cauldron walkthrough at Tokyo Disneyland.
True, a horrifying one. That is.
It was terrible, but that's fine. Jeez, Herbie the Love Bug?
Not animated. Come on. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that Disney went for decades really coasting on the success of Walt Disney's stuff, and then Bob Iger talked about how when he took over from Eisner, how he said post, I think it was Aladdin, the only other Disney character that kids recognize in the parades were Pixar characters.
Ooh.
Yeah. That was one of the things that caused Disney to buy out Pixar, which realized, nobody cares about Disney movies anymore. Sadly, it is odd that you can have this media empire that grew out of this thing, but then doesn't need that thing anymore. Now, I completely agree, and Japan's different. I don't think you could maintain a Ghibli theme park for 50 years based off of the relative handful of movies made by Ghibli up to this point. I do think it would have to be
it's going to go the way of Nara Dreamland in a number of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, and it's okay, I'm going to get morbid for a second. Suzuki is also a peer of Miyazaki. So Suzuki may be saying, I'm going to set this up, but I'm not going to be here for it. You know?
Okay.
So I'm gonna set something up so that it can keep on rolling after I'm gone. But I don't have, I don't have to make something for me that's going to last for 50 years. Right?
Yeah, I'm not going to be feeding off of this after I'm gone. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and Suzuki seems like the kind of person who, definitely feels a responsibility to the staff and the company and the organization to keep that running as long as possible. Find some business model. But I think, given just kind of the very, very unique situation that Ghibli is in, especially given that with Mamoru Hosoda and Makoto Shinkai, where now if you want to make a well-respected family anime film in Japan, you don't have to go to Studio Ghibli anymore. Right?
That's true. Yes. That's kind of terrible for them.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
So those animators, those directors, they're moving to those places now to make their mark.
Well, it certainly leaves an interesting question there about the studio process for anime versus movie studio process.
Mm-hmm.
In that, MGM, Columbia Pictures, Fox Studios, a lot of these old Hollywood studios merged, disappeared. They fell under somebody else's aegis at some point in time, Paramount Studios, etc. And it's like, are there any of the animation studios that have managed, besides Ghibli, that have gotten enough cash backing and have done so well that they've diversified, that they've acquired, and that they will journey forward?
Yeah.
Or at some point in time, you're just going to have Mappa's going to fold up, JC Staff's going to fold, and then they'll run their course. Gainax, there you go.
Yeah.
Everybody will move off and form another studio, and then it will have some of the core people from the prior, but it won't be an acquisition merger. It'll be just one just is gone and one's now new.
It's interesting because you can have like a Shonen Jump land, right? You can have a One Piece land,
right?
But that's coming from Katakawa. It's coming from the publisher. It's not coming from the anime studio. I think that's a really good point. I think you don't really have anime studios with enough of their own property to really sustain themselves solo.
Well, and how does Toei do it these days?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like I see Toei on stuff. You'll see them in the credits and stuff. Grand sponsor no teikyo de yokorishimasu. I see them in there.
Yep.
But I can't think of anything that I particularly have seen a movie of and been like, oh my gosh, that's Toei and they're doing so good.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and Toei still very much feels like that pop culture studio, right? Like they are producing Digimon. They're producing stuff that is that will do fine and that people will watch, but that aren't going to be remembered, aren't going to be beloved family classics in 10 years, right? People are not going to watch the second Digimon Try movie every Christmas,
Kiss saves Christmas again. Awesome.
So yeah, it's interesting that you get these things, and you look at how much that's changed. You look at how, like, Sunrise back in the day was really trying to be this original voice. You see how Madhouse has very much charted its own way. It's done some fascinating stuff, but it's always, as Masao Maruyama, who runs it, says, got to keep the lights on. Like, you've got to keep getting in the money, and that often means adapting whatever is the popular isekai light novel of the year. So you, in a sense, and this gets back to why all this is so fascinating to me, is that Walt Disney is the exception, right? Walt Disney was always the exception. Like, he was super popular. He managed to parlay that into this really exceptional empire that he built very brilliantly. But most other animation studios in the West didn't follow that model, right? They never had their Snow White.
Walter Lantz never sort of made it to the limelight like Walt did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's a lot to be said for Roy O. Disney.
Sure. Oh yeah.
His brother.
Mm-hmm.
That Walt's creative capacity far exceeded his business acumen.
Mm-hmm.
And Roy, on the other hand, had a far better lockdown on how to make the profitable dreams functional and real, and left Walt to sort of dream his dreams, but Roy was busy on the money side.
Yeah.
So I think if Walt had been left to his own devices, it would have ended up like Laugh-O-Gram Films.
Absolutely. Yes.
That he would have had all these wonderful concepts and would have driven that entire thing into the ground. So. And
to kind of bring it to full circle, I think, again, nothing against Hayao Miyazaki. He's a brilliant man, but I think the exact same thing can be said of Suzuki. I think it is the fact that Toshio Suzuki is out there making the business deals and finding and sort of advising Miyazaki on kind of what projects to pursue that kept that studio alive for decades. Because lest we forget, Miyazaki was a well-respected but kind of line director at Toei when Suzuki found him, chugging away at Lupin III. And Suzuki was like, this Nausicaa thing you're working on seems neat. Maybe you should pursue that. Let me help you with that.
Maybe you should do something that will actually burst you out into the public consciousness. Nice. But that's that's an interesting dynamic there, where you have the dreamer and the realist, and that some in a moment of kismet they sort of come together and form this thing that brings a lot of potential out and gives us all a lot of joy. Hooray!
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And I think you see that in a lot of ways. I think, it's kind of the weird thing that I think Michael Eisner was trying to be both of those things. He wanted to be the creative, but he also had the pragmatism of the longtime studio exec to know what worked and what didn't. And the combination of those things ultimately, if you liked one, you didn't like the other. So if you were a creative, you were annoyed at his pragmatism, and if you're a business person, you were annoyed. Why are you pursuing this Paris Disney thing? Why are you going off in this weird direction? Which I think is one of the reasons why he gained the reputation he did. Kind of unfortunately, because I think Eisner in many ways saved Disney, but he was the right man at the right time for the wrong group of people, if you will, right? Sometimes you can't please everybody, I suppose.
Well, I was gonna say Eisner's tenure made Disney relevant again,
Mm-hmm.
and the as I was watching something recently, I was talking about his concentration on things that were not children oriented
Mm-hmm.
as much as the previous administration.
Yeah.
And that tried to make Disney a little bit more on the fence where it was adult and child,
Mm-hmm.
so that you had adult attracted things going on in shows, TV and TV production, and the theme parks
Yep.
that would draw in more.
Mm-hmm.
But his ruthless cost cutting also cheapened some of the things. So it was, but it brought Disney to the forefront again. So he was a divisive character in that corporate setting.
And he came along at a time when Disney was struggling, when profits were down, when there were all sorts of problems, and there's a great moment where he came in very early in his tenure, like he's starting to take over, and he was like, okay, so give me kind of the skinny. What's going on here? And everyone was like, well, so we have the studios and all this stuff, and we have the theme parks, and the theme parks are where we make all our money. And they kind of went on. He said, hold on, okay, great. I've been to the theme parks. I've noticed you haven't upgraded them in like 5 years. And like you just mentioned that these are the things that make all your money as like item number 38 out of 95. Why aren't you spending more? Why don't you care about the theme parks? And they're like, well, it's just the theme parks. He was like, maybe we should be paying more attention to the thing that's actually making us money and make sure that makes the most money possible in a reasonable way. And then everything else can be funded by that thing. Maybe one of the reasons you're having money problems is because you're not paying attention to the things that make you money. And I was like, oh, that's a thought, Well,
which is funny, because that was the full circle of things. It's like you were a studio that had theme parks, then you became theme parks that had studios, then you went back to get to being a studio that has theme parks. There you go.
Exactly. And so just to be clear, because there's some questions in the chat room, the issue is that Disney made massive money from they brought in massive money. They didn't make a huge. They put that money back into the business, so the profits weren't hugely massive. Throughout the 30s and the 40s, 40s saw a downturn, the war. 50s saw an upturn, a relatively mild upturn because of television, and Disney didn't really adapt to television too well. And then Disney passed away. And then in the 70s and 80s was when Disney's fortunes really lessened.
Tanked.
Yeah. And they were doing having a lot of problems. And then they had the new golden age, starting with Little Mermaid. Actually, well, okay, we can get into animation territory, but Little Mermaid it depends on who you ask, but sort of Hercules was roughly or Pocahontas maybe was where that started to tail off, and then it was basically post Hercules was where like they would produce all these movies and they would come out and kids would maybe go see them and then forget about them within 3 months, and it wasn't until Toy Story that things changed around. And it wasn't even a Disney movie. It was just a studio they were helping to finance. So yeah, weird times.
Well, it was certainly a transformative time, because you go from the 1989 Little Mermaid to the point where Pixar really starts to pick up steam, and as you had said, you notice that you've got everything Disney. Every kid's got to go see this. People are just adults. Everyone loves this.
Yeah.
To the point where it's like, oh, there's this neat CGI animated thing, and it's not Disney. So we don't. What were you doing last year?
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah. Everyone remembers Brother Bear, right?
Yeah, that was super. Yeah. That acquisition of Pixar really, oh boy, that was a critical moment, because I think that you really probably could have had Pixar buy Disney if they had kept the steam going. That would have been an interesting transaction.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, what basically happened is that Disney bought Pixar and used them to replace their animation studio.
Yep.
Basically, integrated, but really Pixar just took over. And as a result, we've seen a great rise. I mentioned I watched Ralph Saves the Internet a couple days ago. Have you seen Ralph Saves the Internet?
Sorry, I'm getting a feedback on that. What did you say?
Have you seen Ralph Saves the Internet? Or Ralph Breaks the Internet?
No, I have not. I saw the original Wreck-It Ralph. But I have not seen the Save the Internet.
So Ralph Breaks the Internet is a, as I mentioned, it's a fun sequel. It does some fun things, but it's pretty predictable. But in the middle of it, and this is where I started falling off my chair laughing, the characters end up in Disney.com on the internet. Oh yeah. So they're just surrounded by, Eeyore and R2-D2 and stormtroopers and just, everything. And then at one point, Vanellope ends up in the princess's room. And it's every Disney princess all hanging out together in one room. And it is Pixar's chance to comment on the Disney princess phenomenon. It's kind of fascinating, because the reason they're hanging out is because, and this being sort of a metaphor for the internet, they're there because there are millions of preteen girls taking "Which Disney princess am I?" quizzes, and every time it ends, that princess comes out and says, "Oh, you chose me. You're just like me." And so they're all hanging out in the back, kind of waiting for their turn to come out.
Oh boy!
And so it's just all these Disney princesses just hanging out, kind of being themselves, and they're all kind of the same. Except for Ariel, who is a complete dimwit the entire time. And is just like, "Oh, it's you! Isn't it wonderful being here? Oh, we're on land. Oh, isn't it great?" And it's like, okay. And you look at just this, like 20 girls who are all these sort of iconic characters, and you can kind of palette swap them in a lot of ways. And
they're iconic, yet they're also very cardboard.
Yeah, exactly. And they do some fun stuff with it. There's some great sequences, but you can tell, like, there is a certain commentary on the fact that, like, Disney came up with this. Walt Disney created, had these princesses, and then the Walt Disney Corporation developed this formula. There has to be this princess in every movie, and you have to have this galaxy of products surrounding her. And I'm an anime fan. Magical girls do this all the time. Like, I'm not complaining, in the sense that, yes, that is a formula that can work. But it definitely became the cardboard cutout formula. And it's, when you see them all at once, you're like, wow, yeah, this has gotten kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, but they physically look different.
Yeah. This one has blonde hair. That one has brown hair.
Right. I mean, it was, what was the one with Merida? What is that? What's that?
Oh, Brave.
Brave. She at least is a little bit more gung-ho. Moana, she's a little more gung-ho.
So, in this whole sequence, they're talking to all the Disney princesses, and they have the whole thing. And then Merida, they make some comment, Merida leans forward and goes, And Penelope turns to them and goes, "What did she say?" And they go, "We don't know. We can't tell. She's from the other studio."
Nice.
But yeah, no, and that's the thing, is that it is funny. Like, Moana rather, Elsa to a degree. They're really the only two characters in that, other than Ariel, who's this sense of wonder 14-year-old. They're the only ones who stand out, really, in that entire sequence. And like, obviously, they all have their personalities. Like, Belle's over there reading her book and all that.
Right.
But like, there is like this, like these personalities really do not differ that much at all. And I guess that's one of the interesting things, getting back to anime, is that, you contrast that with, Sailor Moon compared to Utena. Like Utena the girl, versus Serena, versus trying to think of other magical girl characters, Nanoha, versus, those are all very different characters, right? Like, when Magical Girl does their Magical Girl formula, generally, at least, they do something interesting with that, and they have some distinctive personalities to them. I don't know.
It's within the magical girl trope, but they're individuals in that trope.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Versus the Disney princesses are all just exactly the formula.
Mm-hmm. Now, Joshua brings up a good point. If we want to take that to Moe, how different is the best girl in any given high school romance anime? If the main character is in love with his childhood best friend, how dissimilar is that from one anime series to another? Not that much. It's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a fair point.
I saw that comment. Disney princess, one character in 20 costumes. Nice.
Not inaccurate.
No, that's fairly accurate for a lot of them. Well, certainly the old school ones.
Yeah, definitely.
Once you get, obviously, a little bit more current Pixar time, the princesses get a little bit more flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, they get a little sassier too, which I always appreciate. But yeah, it's
you didn't exactly get a lot of sass out of Snow White.
No, or Cinderella, or Sleeping Beauty, or
Yeah.
And granted, I mean, this is one of the interesting things I think about the history of animation, is that, that was not Sleeping Beauty was meant to be an animated version of that fairy tale. It was meant to be that fairy tale come to life, fairy tale picture book in animated form, and there was no sass in that character in that fairy tale, right? So the intent was to make it like that fairy tale was, where the girl is this sort of wide-eyed, innocent victim.
Which, as we well know, some of the source material from the Brothers Grimm, a lot of the artistic license taken to make that story more palatable to an American audience.
Yep.
Really, you didn't have a lot of. I'm not saying that there were not sassy or dark themes in America at the time. Yeah. But that wasn't going to sell.
Right.
So, the artistic license really butchered a lot of these very grim stories.
Oh, yeah.
Pun intended, I suppose.
Nice. Yeah, it's odd. I think it's always important to be aware of cultural context and like artistic intent, and recognizing that, like, I would have loved to have seen a more complex Sleeping Beauty. but I don't think that's what they wanted to make. And so you can argue about whether that would have been a more interesting movie. I think it certainly would have been. But it's not what they were going. There's an amazing, I forget if it's a Russian or a Japanese puppet film version of Sleeping Beauty that is an adaptation of one of the original versions of the myth, which is much more about like who's sleeping with whom, basically. It's much more about like, because Sleeping Beauty's she gets a stepmother who tries to kill her. There's a whole other context around. So Sleeping Beauty's parentage is a big thing in the original Sleeping Beauty story, and that's all in there. And so there's this whole other level of complexity around those elements that gets into, which I think works a little better in a puppet film that has this sort of I want to say unnaturalness to it, or this sort of artificiality to it. Anyway.
Well, as I say, I certainly think if you look at Snow White
Mm-hmm.
and some of what the hunter that's sent out to collect her heart,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? You've got things that are really, I would think, would make a really very interesting anime. Because you've got the psychology of what it's like to be hunted for your body part to prove that you're dead by someone, who's a malevolent, evil person.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Then you have to take it on the lam and run. That would be a very interesting, very dark anime. I mean,
Absolutely.
Kimetsu no Yaiba. Instead of turning Snow White into a zombie, just make Snow White running from the evil that's chasing her. You know what I mean? It's like, there you go. That would work.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's interesting because I think anime these days, until recently, has had this restriction where most anime has had to have some real world connection. Right? We didn't get a lot of like weird fantasy anime things. We got high school romances and things like that. Or we get like video game tie-ins, stuff like that. We didn't get a lot of like fairy tales, right? You would occasionally get a Princess Tutu, but in general you didn't get that kind of thing. And I think as a result, anime tended to move towards more, for lack of a better term, kind of grounded storylines, where you didn't have like really big, epic and weird ideas in anime, the way that you would say in the 90s or the 80s, where you could have a Kimagure Orange Road where the main characters are psychic. It's a high school romance, but the main character has telekinetic powers. And you didn't get that as much more recently in anime, and so I think you didn't get the same penetration you get of those sort of fairy tale concepts, those sort of interesting twists on fairy tale stories that we tend to have over here more, just because of differences in medium, right? And the fact that I think there's a lot of I think there's a flexibility in, and I'm talking out of my rear end at this point. I think there's a flexibility in certain American mediums that isn't as common in, say, anime. And by that I mean that it is more common to see an American film that mashes up two genres you've never seen mashed up before than in anime. In anime, you'll see weird genre mashups, but generally somebody's done that genre mashup before, or somebody's done that thing. Whereas I think over here in America, there's more of a willingness to try something weird and to try something. How to describe this? It's that whole originality thing. And I
now,
think,
are we talking like Sundance Film Festival kind of thing, where
I guess I am.
It's like these indie film kind of things,
Right. I think, and I'm actually thinking also more of like comic books, where like comic books will just say, and this guy can punch the sun. And they'll throw lots of weird genres and weird powers together, whereas most anime, most of the time, feels more genre conservative, if you will. I don't know. And I say that as somebody who has typically seen anime as very different and very, very willing to experiment. But I think there is a flavor to that I'm trying to get to that I can't quite describe.
Well, I mean, I think of the sort of oddities seeing like Tatami Galaxy.
Yep, sure.
And Night is Long.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That, or is it Night is Long or Night is Short?
Night is Short, Walk on Girl.
Night is Short, Walk on Girl.
Yeah.
That you still got, very relatable character framework.
Yeah.
And what is kind of more mashup is just the presentation visually.
Yeah.
So that there's a certain conservative element to what the characters are.
Yeah.
In a framework that is more experimental in the visual context.
That's a really interesting point.
Versus like things like a lot of indie films. Well, they will take some really bizarre character stuff and smash them into different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Anime tends to deal with character archetypes much more closely, whereas I think in the West we're much more comfortable having a character who isn't as easily defined, who doesn't fall as cleanly into the lovable rogue or what have you. That's interesting.
Which you've mentioned before, which is kind of funny to talk about the ambiguity, where a story doesn't have to necessarily come to an end.
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't have to have a clean, nice, tied up little experience. Ambiguity tolerance. Just in saying about how the mashup with Western characters plays in is like a type of ambiguity tolerance, because the character that you're getting that has weird things going on, you have to tolerate that for the purpose of the story, versus the ambiguity tolerance for anime is about the ending, not necessarily the character themselves.
Totally. I think that's very true, and I think there's also an ambiguity tolerance around like both plot expectations of just where a plot goes, but also around, like you were saying, visual presentation, where anime is much more willing to have strange things happen visually without explanation, and I always go back to jumping. Every anime character can jump 40 feet from a standstill. And nobody comments on it. It's never an explicit power. It's just a thing people can do. And because it looks cool, right? And I think that is actually a thing where I think you see that a lot in anime, where characters will do things that are not physically possible because it looks cool, and there's this sort of unspoken contract between the anime creators and the audience saying, you guys don't care, right, if this is real, as long as it looks awesome. And so we're going to give you that awesomeness.
Which you've just described just about every shonen series there is. You're like, hey, here's this really cool, power-up fight scene, and you're not going to ask, how exactly do you generate, physically the number of joules necessary to fire off a Kamehameha, or a spirit bomb or whatever. You don't need the mechanics of that. Just accept the fact that he's powerful and he does this thing, or she does.
Yeah. And again, I think ambiguity tolerance also gets to why shonen does or doesn't work for people, because you had that idea that Goku is as powerful as he needs to be to defeat whatever enemy he's facing, right? Like it doesn't really matter how much he has, trained. He will beat the bad guy because he's going to beat the bad guy, and that's just kind of the nature of that thing. We don't have to have the scene in the comic book where the guy goes back and says, "Aha! But you see, I secretly went back and found the star of the cosmos, which gives me this ability, which allows me, right? It doesn't matter. You just, there has to be some justification, but we live with it because it's cool."
Well, hence all the development of hair color, eye color, the sweat droplet, the little red X on the forehead, all these little things that they're in there, and that shortcuts you to whatever the point's going on here.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the interesting thing too, I think, also, is just differences in expectation. Also, as things have changed, as time has changed, I think, like, for fans of, say, our generation, where anime was different, where anime was something you compared to the animation you were used to. A lot of fans of our generation got into it because it was different. Whereas a lot of teenagers getting into anime now are getting into it because, well, everybody watches One Piece. Everybody watches this. This is the same as a Marvel movie. This is just a thing where you accept the conventions of the genre and move on. So it doesn't have that specialness of, I have to, like, suspend my expectations of genre. It's just another thing to consume that has its own standards.
It's another thing I could consume and go buy a headband from Naruto.
Exactly.
I could go buy the little Super Balls that have Dragon Ball stars in them and bounce them off the house.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Cool. Well, it is. Whoops. Sorry. That is not what I wanted to do. That is very interesting. 1 second. Okay. I'm learning all sorts of interesting things about my backdrops right now. Anyway, it's all good. Just moving windows around. Just change the visuals. It is closing on 1 o'clock in the morning, so we should probably end this here fairly soon. Was there anything else news-wise you wanted to talk about?
I can't think of anything else I could add to all that we've discussed over this wide-ranging field of everything. I haven't heard anything else interesting that I can think about. Because talking about KyoAni again, about they closed out all of the donations, and I know last time we had talked about they had started to distribute to the families. But it's very interesting that there hasn't been any kind of recent update that I've noticed about that either. It's like, so I suppose the last time I'd heard of that and we discussed it probably was the last time it was.
Yeah, I guess so. And I suspect they're just kind of being very conservative right now. I'm sure they're working on stuff. They're just like, let's not announce anything. Let's not push anything until we actually move forward.
For their final thank you everyone for everything that you've done. I'm assuming that's it wasn't anything else to fill in. Like, okay, now all of it's done. We've completed this process. Probably being not coy, but being polite about it, saying, we're starting the process. It will go to the end. Thank you. No further information. Y'all be good.
Yeah. Exactly. It just. We'll get back to you.
Hey, now I'm Brett Newhall.
Hey, there we go.
And Gently.
This is
nice.
We'll get this all figured out at some point. But yeah.
So that's it from this end.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I think that's all I've got. Cool. Thank you very much. This has been awesome, and we'll have to keep on doing it.
Thanks, guys.
All right. See you all.
Good talking with y'all. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take out the
Ice
stream.
me out.
Yeah. So we will see how. What is the best way for me to do that? I think I will just do.
Shut that down.
That. Yes, that'll work. Cool. And then just switch that over to this. Okay. All right. That was that. How was the audio on that? Because I know I had to do a weird like microphone to the speaker thing. Yes, Black Clover is absolutely shonen, I would say. So I know the audio on that is not perfect, kind of quiet. All right, okay, yeah. I will see what I can do to improve on that. That is a problem on my end, is that I'm literally like holding up a microphone to the speaker to get the audio better. So I'll figure out a way of routing that around. And something tells me that there are ways of bringing in folks like from Zoom on YouTube Live, and if folks have solved that problem, just betting. Cool. Well, yeah, I think that'll do it for all of us. Thank you all so much. But the big question before we leave, of course, is what did we learn on the show? What did we learn? We've learned that there is a long history of animation, and that things are complicated. We've learned that there's that Disney has its own long history. We've learned that Hayao Miyazaki has a complicated reputation of his own. We've learned that there's definitely something interesting, and I definitely want to think more about what JJ and I were talking about regarding that ambiguity tolerance and the differences in genre and so forth between the West and anime, and that it's not simply a matter of anime being weird. We learned that JJ has an Android version of him. That's true. We learned Disney makes a lot of money. That is absolutely a fact. And they continue making money. And they'll probably continue making money for a very long time because they're good at doing that. Yeah, well, I mean, Studio Ghibli did a movie of Princess Kaguya. So they're probably like, well, that's done. Also, Disney tends to do Western myths, not Asian ones. But and the other problem, I mean, I hear you. I think Princess Kaguya definitely is, you know, a classic sort of princess myth, but it has a weird ending. So I think they'd have to crack that ending first. What else? We also learned that mobile games are popular, and that there's a mobile game for pretty much any anime you can think of. And so if you want it, there will be a mobile game of it. Yeah, we might one day. That is very true. All right, that'll do it for me for this week. Thank you all so much. We're definitely going to have to figure out a different way of doing Utena, because I always end this way too late for me to watch any more anime. But maybe we'll figure something out. So, as always, thank you all very much. Hope you guys have a great week. And this has been a great Saturday stream for me, at least. So, thank you all. Hope you have a great week. And until next time, watch more anime.